Salutations, Legions of Doom. Welcome to the podcast The Storm. Socially awkward outcasts, crazy weirdos, and all around nerds convene to talk and debate all things pop culture. With me, as always, is my co-host, the nerdy occultist, aka the Authenticator, Dalton L. Mortimer.
Good evening, everybody. It's hot.
Yep.
It's stupid degrees outside, and I can't even keep my fan up all the way because otherwise I won't be able to hear Brainstormer when he talks. So yeah.
And I'm your host last time on Wannabe, the Brainstormer Pop Culture. How's everyone doing tonight? Besides the whole hot thing.
I'm fine, other than it being stupid degrees.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Again, it was weird, kind of a slow week, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, okay. So we took a break off from this article, and we're going to spend at least an hour, God help us, on this one that we've been meaning to cover for a while. Well, not for a while.
We've been covering it, but there's so much stupid packed into such a small space, and it goes on for so indescribably long. So this is our personal white whale for the moment, folks.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So yeah. One sec. Share screen. All right, so we'll be starting off where we left off. This is In Plain Sight: How White Supremacy, Misogyny, and Hatred Targeted the Star Wars Sequel Trilogy and Won. This was by... I'm not even going to go look it up because I... give me one sec.
Yeah. Short version, no, they didn't, but this guy is going to spin all sorts of conspiratorial webs of lies to insinuate that they did. So, yeah.
So we're going to start off here because I believe we ended here last time, which is All Roads Lead to YouTube and Analysis.
Okay. Well, we are anti-SJWs on the YouTubes, so have at you then, you ignorant fuck.
Right. Yeah. Like I said, this is going to be like an hour, so around 9:10, we're going to call it, because I do not think we cannot handle any more than that.
Yeah, we have to take it in small doses, or otherwise we will be here forever.
Or literally just fucking end ourselves, because this thing is a life-draining piece of shit.
Yeah.
Anyway, all roads lead to YouTube and Analysis, as established in the last section. I know that almost half the negativity about The Last Jedi from top engaged tweets are from an account that links back to a YouTube or Twitch page. Therefore, going into this analysis, I was expecting YouTube to be more negative against The Last Jedi than what I observed on Twitter. Sorry, I'm kind of tired.
Yeah, because Twitter is a very biased platform generally, and generally the people who have problems with The Last Jedi and its surrounding fucking of the Star Wars franchise tend to want to be more thorough. Granted, that does lead some of them, like geeks and gamers, to repeat themselves quite a bit, but that's a different story for a different day, and I'm not giving you the satisfaction of agreeing with you that some of the people involved are not exactly the most intellectually honest people on the planet Earth, because you, sir, take intellectual honesty to the form of art, and it makes my faith in humanity go into the negative values.
Not in a good way, by the way, when you said art.
Yeah, air quotes, the size of the Grand Canyon. But moving on.
Mm-hmm. YouTube videos containing the keyword The Last Jedi were analyzed based on the videos provided to me in the algorithm. In other words, I was only analyzing videos that YouTube would give me if I was looking to watch a video after searching The Last Jedi in the YouTube search bar.
See, this is another problem. You don't know enough about your subject matter to actually analyze it honestly, which means you're getting a biased sample of what either your main parameter will give you, which not every anti-social justice video that might reference The Last Jedi is going to have The Last Jedi in the title, so fuck you. But also, it's reliant on the YouTube algorithm itself, which is not a viable method of selection because YouTube, like yourself, is also a pseudo intellectual nest of fops that think they know better than the people who actually use the platform. But that's a different story for a different day moving forward.
As I expected, sentiment on YouTube went slightly negative with a negative to positive sentiment ratio of 1.6 to 1, 48 negative videos versus 30 positive videos out of 447 total videos. That's a very small ratio when you're looking at the total of videos.
Yeah, you again, millions of videos are uploaded to YouTube a day in any given genre. Your sampling methodologies and your sampling sizes are fucking statistically irrelevant, and they will bias your results, and this is the problem. This is why none of even if I was coming in fresh to this bullshit, there would be significant details wrong with your methodology and your sampling that make me question the validity of your research. And as it happens, as someone who was there for the the development of most of these phenomena, I can tell you that most of the people you were referring to are not and have never been even alt-right adjacent, and also are just people who happen to have a different worldview from you, you arrogant, pseudo intellectual piss stain of a human being. Moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Like the analysis I conducted on Twitter, I wanted to dig into who these videos belong to. I simplified the methodology for this analysis and looked at 3 affiliations. 1, YouTubers who make videos about games/gaming. 2, YouTubers who use their channel to push alt-right or radical right ideology. Or 3, accounts that do not meet the first 2 affiliations, including media YouTubers, culture critics, or fandom personalities.
The alt-right is a tiny, hilariously inept fraction within a fraction within a fraction of ignorant fuckers. There are literally all of 3 of them that I can name. One of them is Richard Spencer, the other one is John Francois Gariepy, and the third one is a guy by the name of Baked Alaska, and I'm not even sure if he goes by that anymore. He may have actually then moved from YouTube entirely, but that's a different story. And I think maybe Millennial Woes, maybe, but I'm not familiar enough with Millennial Woes' content to include them, so massive asterisk there. But point being, you keep using the word alt-right, and not to belabor the point by using a Princess Bride quote, but ahem, you keep using that word. I do not think it means what you think it means. And also, the right wing is not the only wing that has a problem with social justice. Brainstormer and many thousands of other people within our broader circle of acquaintances and friends and what have you are mostly just centrists who happen to disagree with the moral worldview of social justice. And I, and many other people that I can name, are left wing policy wise, and we just happen to disagree with the moral framework of social justice. Like, I voted for Bernie twice. And my second choices the last time around were Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard. So don't come at me with this, oh, you're just a conservative bullshit. And also, because I know this is going to come up sooner or later, it's not just straight white Christian males that have a problem with your bullshit either. Because, I am crippled and gay and an occultist. Brainstormer is a rather disappointed former Christian and from an inner city and Hispanic. So don't fucking begin with that, oh, you're just an invalid human being for believing this derp nonsense. Fucking, I'm sorry. The fact that he put this much intellectual rigor and academic rigor into basically what amounts to the cultural equivalent of Scientology is pissing me right the hell off. And the fact that he also is basically calling everyone who I consider a friend to be a Nazi also is pissing me off. And I think he might be including me in that and Brainstormer in that sentiment as well. Which yeah, no, fuck you. Not a Nazi, never have been a Nazi, never will be a Nazi, and you can fuck off. Moving on. Uh okay, Brainstormer had to do a thing, so he will be back momentarily, and I will fill the dead air with something.
I'm back.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Like the analysis I conducted on Twitter, I wanted to dig into who. Sorry, I already read that. God damn it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not gonna lie, folks. I am kind of tired. I had a rough night last night. Don can attest to that because I told him the story. Don't really want to get into it here. It's gross.
Basically, both of us have a tendency to completely fuck over our sleep schedules, so that explains a lot of that.
Yeah, pretty much. I really need to get a job. Might help me with my sleep schedule.
Mm-hmm.
Alright. The vast majority of positive videos, about 87%, about Last Jedi, are fair reviews by accounts that would be included in the third category, including media YouTubers like Chris Stuckman and What Culture, fandom personalities like Kevin Smith, and podcasters like Mr. Sunday Movies. Positive, I'm not entirely sure about.
Okay, but the thing that bothers me here is you literally just called positive reviews of Last Jedi fair, which I dare say is not a stipulation you're going to extend to any of the negative reviews of Last Jedi. Now, are you? Which again is you biasing your data by at least coming to your data with a bias in your own head. And if you're not going to make an attempt to account for your own biases, then none of your data, no matter how much effort you put into it, is going to be inherently valuable or valid. And given that your entire worldview basically operates on my side valid, their side invalid, you might want to work on actually validating yourself every great now and again, sir. Moving on. Brainstormer? I'm assuming he dips out again. Brainstormer, are you there? Da-da-da-da-da-da.
I totally forgot I muted myself.
Okay, that explains that.
Sorry. No, I got nothing really to say or anything.
Okay.
Granted, you and I mean, to be fair, Last Jedi came out before we kind of really met and stuff.
Right.
But I think you and I were kind of both in the camp of kind of give a brief review of it on like a podcast, I believe. Like when we reviewed the whole sequel trilogy, I think.
Yeah, we did, and I talked about it, I think, with Anglantine, back when it actually did come out. I know we did a stream for when the Rise of Skywalker came out, and I know I was quite vocal in my kind of visceral hatred of Last Jedi on the grounds that it misunderstands the Joseph Campbellian hero's journey / monomyth that Star Wars is inherently based on. And I think I've ranted about that in other streams where we've covered this article as well. So yeah, there's that.
Right. But my thoughts on Last Jedi, and I think you and I both came to this conclusion as we were discussing it, was effectively it doesn't go far enough in the ideas it presents. It presents interesting ideas, however, it doesn't.
It doesn't actually use them effectively.
No, it doesn't.
And the problem with Last Jedi is it is so self-congratulatory with its own subversion, quote unquote, that it doesn't actually feel the need to present a interesting or compelling story at any point. In fact, it seems quite psychotically obsessed with turning everything that Star Wars has always been and inverting it just to kind of tease the audience almost. And unfortunately, Rise of Skywalker was tasked with basically undoing everything that Last Jedi did and trying to put it back on some semblance of track, which basically led J.J. Abrams to stick 2 movies into 1 movie, and that terminally screwed up that movie too. So yeah, the entire sequel trilogy is basically bunk because while J.J. Abrams started things off on a very much cyclical monomyth sort of place with Force Awakens, Rian Johnson basically took a dump on that in the sequel, and then Disney learned something resembling its lesson and begged J.J. Abrams to come back and re-Star Wars-ize Star Wars, which led J.J. to stick 2 movies into the space of 1 movie and ruined it. So, yeah. And meanwhile, in the interim between Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker, Rian Johnson and a lot of other higher ups in the Star Wars production team and so on basically whined at the fans for not being pleased that everything they like about Star Wars was subverted, quote unquote.
Mm-hmm.
Moving forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Sorry, one second. Now we see some diagrams here of like one of those bubble charts. I never really understood these kind of diagrams. Like I said, we're not really going to be covering like the graphs and stuff, just because like I think it's added filler. If you want to, like, the links are always going to be in the description. Like if you want to read this yourself.
Yeah, it it takes too much time out of our day, and while I enjoy shitting on this guy's research methodology, I'm not Aiden Paladin and I'm not Tildeer, and both of those internet personalities are more qualified to actually tackle the graphs themselves. So if you want to see somebody do that, I would say find your way over to either Aiden Paladin or Tildeer's channel, because they are good at the research spurging in a way that I am passable at, but not great.
Yeah.
So
Really just great YouTubers in general.
yeah.
In comparison, 40% of negative videos are classified as other and include negative reviews by Red Letter Media and Wisecrack. It should be noted that other also includes videos by What Culture. Although What Culture's review of The Last Jedi is ultimately positive, the YouTube channel did release 2 negative videos about the film, seemingly cashing in on the YouTube backlash. Or it could be that they just
Had mixed opinions on the matter.
Yeah.
And here once again lies the problem. How are you, the person who wrote this article, arbitrating positive and negative? And once again, I must point out that it seems like a lot of your other category, the category that you consider valid, is YouTubers that have a establishment bias and have a lot of corporate and or basically the backing of the higher ups of YouTube, the ones that YouTube itself would like for its audience to gravitate towards, rather than the actual people with actual platforms that have earned their subscriber bases by actually being like entertaining and so forth. So once again, we end up with you having a these people are valid because the establishment says so bias to your research there. And therein lies the problem. You only consider something valid, it seems, when it's got the stamp of approval from the powers that be. So anything that's not within the scope of the powers that be, in your opinion, either doesn't matter or is inherently invalid because reasons. Moving on.
All right. Sorry, throat's a little parched.
Right. No problem.
A quarter of negative videos are from channels that post content about gaming. However, within this group, several accounts could be labeled as pushing alt-right or radical right-wing ideology. That is always such a pain in the ass to say.
Once again.
Hold on. Let me finish the sentence. Sorry.
Okay, go.
But are not classified as such since their channels do not primarily push a political agenda or their exact political beliefs are hard to pin down. Okay.
Okay, well, here's the problem. You erroneously conflate certain vectors within conservatism and the alt-right. The alt-right is a very, very specific vector within the right-wing spectrum. And once again, it is tiny and very often laughable. More to the point, however, to call anyone who disagrees with your paradigm or the paradigm of social justice conservative skews the fact that many people within the anti-social justice movement are centrist or left-wing. And there is nothing inherently conservative or right-wing about being opposed to social justice. It very much depends on the arguments people make against social justice and why they oppose it. I, for example, oppose social justice on the grounds that it is irrational and is actually an obstacle to meaningful equality. Because I actually care, at least in theory, about egalitarianism and would very much like it if we could get away from the pseudo-intellectual Hegelian exercise of oppressor and oppressed dynamics. that have nothing whatsoever to do with actual fucking history if you look at history correctly, dumbass. And most other people are somewhere in that vein more so than they are in the vein of, ooh, this messes with my traditionalism, derp. Because I will say this, and I will continue saying this as often as I can. I oppose traditionalism just as hard as I oppose the ideology of social justice. And if you doubt me on that, explore this channel. Brainstormer and I have made a quite significant effort to call out groups like 1 Million Moms, or when people like just was it last week when we covered the Sandman casting thing? I I railed
Yes. Yeah.
for very nearly 40 minutes just on how stupid I thought the knee-jerk anti-social justice reaction to the Sandman casting was, because the arguments being presented to me were irrational and knee-jerk and didn't make any fucking sense. But if I apply that same standard of it's irrational and knee-jerk and doesn't make any fucking sense to the ideology of social justice, then all of a sudden I'm a fucking conservative despite having voted for Bernie twice with, Tulsi and Yang, my second and third choices. Thank you very fucking much. And people who have no grandiose political affiliations whatsoever, also opposing social justice, erroneously get called right wing, no matter how left wing or just politically neutral every other opinion they hold is. Because you see, social justice is very much a universal problem for a lot of different people. So, irregardless of your political affiliations, you can find reasons that have nothing whatsoever to do with right wing or conservatism or traditionalism to oppose social justice, even if you happen to be a member of the demographics that social justice claims to operate on the behalf of. And once again, just to make things perfectly clear, gay, crippled, occultist, and inner city mixed race Hispanic. That is, if we must put our identity cards on the table, there they are. And yet we both oppose the ideology of social justice, because the ideology of social justice does not have and has never had a monopoly on speaking on our behalf. And when it attempts to speak on our behalf and gets it wrong, usually by making us look like hysterical, panderable wusses, we say something because it's fucking annoying. Moving on.
Yep. For example, PewDiePie, whose opinion on The Last Jedi is negative overall, hasn't been without racist and anti-Semitic controversies. In 2017, PewDiePie was called out for the use of Nazi imagery in his videos, including
as a joke that was erroneously taken by people like the Wall Street Journal as a shocking display, when in actuality it was just a joke.
Right. Also,
and once,
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, how to take power away from something is
mock it horribly.
Yeah, pretty much.
And mercilessly.
Also, technically, the Nazi party and like the swastika, they took that from Hinduism and corrupted the actual meaning of that symbol.
Yeah, and or ancient Germanic symbology, which is where they took a lot of that imagery from.
Yeah, fair enough. I just remember hearing that the swastika was also part of Hinduism.
Yeah, a very similar symbol does appear in Hinduism, and it does kind of make sense why they would borrow it from there, because during the late 19th and early 20th century, there was a massive rush for basically anything that had to do with Eastern mysticism, because Tibet and India were open to the Western world for the first time in a very long time. And so people with like academic backgrounds, like anthropologists and historians and shit, went over to places like India and Tibet in order to learn about their culture, and it kind of became a fad among the intelligentsia.
Interesting. And also really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, like again, like if to take power away from something that is malevolent, essentially.
Yeah, you mock it mercilessly until it is nothing more than a two-bit joke.
Yeah, to be fair, how I picture can I say that name still?
As far as I know, we're not going to get yeeted for even just mentioning Hitler. So
Right, okay, yeah. Every time I picture Adolf Hitler, I always imagine the comedic depictions of him, like in a action comedy called Kung Fury.
yeah, or the over the top flamboyant gay version from The Producers.
I need to.
Hail myself, hail to me.
I might
Sorry.
need to watch The Producers.
You really do, and it's kind of sad how much it could not be made today.
Well, that's can be said about any Mel Brooks movie.
Basically, because even though Mel Brooks was Jewish and actually fought in World War II, apparently not even he can get away with mocking Nazis anymore.
Right.
Most of the time.
Also, there's like this Australian comedy show, like it's an absurdist comedy show that I saw on YouTube called Danger Force 5 or Danger 5.
Mm-hmm.
It just has this like character of Hitler, and like he's like still Hitler, but like it's just an aloof goof trying to take over the world.
Or hell, remember sauerkraut Hitler from the movie Sausage Party?
I haven't. I didn't see Sausage Party because it's not my kind of movie.
It's pretty good for what it is. You kind of gotta go in kind of knowing what it's sort of gonna be. But there's a hilarious scene in that movie where a container of sauerkraut, or rather an aisle of sauerkraut, is rallying to exterminate the juice because apparently sauerkraut doesn't like juice.
I just got the joke.
Yeah.
Oh my god. No, but yeah, like no one really fears. I mean, we don't. No one. I'm assuming most average human beings don't like Adolf Hitler.
Yeah. No, he was.
Fear him, as I'm sure the people at the time that of his
Yeah. He shouldn't be. We shouldn't let him just own our collective psychology for the next however many centuries. We should mock him mercilessly because he was a childish dickhead who basically tried to destroy a bunch of people because he wanted some quasi-intellectual mystical utopia that was a bastardized version of the writings of H.P. Blavatsky, whose name I cannot say, who was a contemporary of Aleister Crowley, who basically believed that humanity had fallen from grace so much that at one point we were like these superhuman quasi god beings, and Hitler and his ilk took that general concept, which initially actually Blavatsky herself placed somewhere in what is now Tibet or what is now India, because again that was kind of the fad of the day back in the day.
Right.
But Hitler and his ilk took that, applied it to the Proto-Germanic peoples of what is now Germany, I can't speak. I cannot talk. Bavaria, there we go. And places like that, and created this nonsense bullshit theory of the reason why the Aryan Supermen were not pure anymore was because they interbred with Jews who were somehow biologically inferior, something dark.
Stupidity. I'm realizing.
Yeah, the level. Yeah, go ahead.
I just I knew there was stupidity, obviously, with what happened in history.
Yeah.
But goddamn, that really does take the cake of stupidity.
Yeah, stupidity is far more dangerous than evil, folks. I,
Mm.
I genuinely believe that, because if you look at most genuinely evil things that have happened throughout history, it's not an evil person cackling to themselves and saying, haha, I'm going to knowingly and willfully do evil things. It's someone trying to do something they think is good and completely fucking it up because they're morons and misunderstand shit.
Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah.
That was a whole weird tangent.
Well, I mean, it's relevant because for how, for as often as these people, evoke the specter of Hitler, they don't actually appear to understand Hitler all that well, and therefore they don't really actually make very good points in opposition to it. But yeah, moving on.
Yeah. Okay. In 2017, PewDiePie was called out for use of Nazi imagery in his videos, including a sign that read "Death to all Jews."
Yeah,
Sorry.
he
Um,
was joking and being edgy.
yeah.
Have you never been to the internet?
Later that year, he used the N-word to describe a player during a stream of Player Unknown's Battleground.
And just the accidental use of the N word was enough to get him blacklisted by the Wall Street Journal. And in your mind, that somehow is a valid series of events. Think about what you are saying. A person accidentally, in the heat of the moment while playing video games and being very intensely focused on said video games, was sniped or something, as often happens in video games, and accidentally used the N-word. And Wall Street Journal saw that and wrote a hit piece about the man. And to you, this seems like a realistic and rational series of events. Are you fucking insane? I'm half tempted to actually just say the N-word just to prove the point of how stupid this person is being, but I'm not gonna do it because I don't want this to get taken down.
Okay. Also, it's just because it's a really stupid word, and honestly, it just really.
It is, but much in the same way as we were just saying with the way you defang a concept is by mocking it mercilessly. If everyone just got over themselves and was willing to say the N word and treat it like every other word in the English goddamn language, it wouldn't have the power it currently has. That's how you defang a swear word. You make it not scandalous anymore.
Right. Fair enough. That's actually pretty fair. Sorry.
But as long as there's this level of moralistic outrage where even saying a word can get a person blacklisted in the Wall Street freaking Journal of all places, we'll never get there. For as long as we have this outlook, anyone who even says that word is going to be treated like a leper. No matter the context in which they're saying it, no matter if they actually intended it to be racial or anything at all, no matter if they were joking, no matter if they actually had a point to make about it or anything. It's just that entire word is now yeeted from the proper, respectable English language because we say so. Because something morality.
Right.
Even if you yourself happen to be black, you can't even get away with saying that word anymore. Half the time.
I was about to say because I knew a lot of kids in high school who were black who said that all the time.
Yeah, because and on some level I kind of can understand it because it's the one word that they and they alone can say without it being awkward or morally reprehensible.
Actually, I mean, I just think it's a word that not no one should use, but more so it's just a word that I think has lost the actual meaning of, which is
Yeah.
good, obviously, but I don't know. I think it still just has that kind of negative connotations that really more people should just have more respect for themselves and rather than use that word.
Yeah.
Again,
Although originally that word just meant person with dark skin, because the word nigrum in Latin is literally just a word for black. Like plumbum nigrum is black lead in Latin. So that word is just another word for black. But
right.
because some assholes took it and mangled it, um, all of a sudden that word cannot ever be said ever.
Okay.
Not even in the context of a country name like Niger or Nigeria, for fuck's sake.
That's stupid, and I've never had that happen, but okay.
Yeah.
Shall we move on?
Yeah, we
Because,
shall.
yeah.
Because good God.
Another example is YouTuber Vito, whose negative review of The Last Jedi entitled The Last Jedi, a complete cinematic failure, is one of the most viewed videos mentioning the film with 9.4 million views.
Okay, I genuinely have never heard of this person, but I'm sure they were alright. So
I
moving on.
I have seen that in YouTube, like due to the algorithm that appears on my page from time to time.
Hmm.
Never checked it out because it's kind of a long ass video.
Uh-huh. I'm sure it was pretty similar to Muller's video on the same thing, because I think he called it this. I think he may have actually called it something almost identical to that when he did his review on it.
That was an unbridled rage.
Yeah, something like that.
Respect to that man, by the way, because that guy
Yeah,
makes.
Mueller is cool. I don't watch enough of his content, or I should definitely watch more of his content, but I just don't get around to it often enough, I think.
I simply because I can't, because like again, like he's one of those YouTubers that make really long videos.
Yeah,
Like
he's
I think
he's very thorough and well
that's
spoken.
that is respect. That's a lot of respect there, by the way, because you don't get a
Yeah.
lot of YouTubers who do that. Because mostly some just make like 10-minute videos without really getting into anything.
Cough, cough, geeks and gamers cough.
I was referring to video essayists that I watch, but whatever.
Uh-huh.
All right. His political views far from right wing to leftist, and he doesn't like to associate with alt right leaders like Jack Posobiec, who he has described as a grifter, even though he does indeed follow Posobiec. If I said that name wrong, I'm sorry.
I I don't know enough about that person to formulate an opinion, so I'm just going to leave it.
But why does it matter what his political views are, though? Like vetoes, I mean.
That is another thing. And incidentally, I regularly stream with several of the people that I know for a fact you're going to mention throughout this article, and yet I am kind of the token lefty on basically every stream I'm in. Um, and also, again, being gay and crippled and shit. So you selectively seem to be aware that left-wing people also have a problem with The Last Jedi and or social justice as a whole. But because you like one person, you're willing to let them off the hook, whereas with somebody like me, you're probably not even aware that I exist, even though I regularly make appearances on kind of everyone's streams at some point or other. Like I've literally done streams with a guy who on YouTube goes by the name Supreme Heretic. His name is Drew, and he's written for Bounding into Comics. I've done his channel twice now. I've been on stream with him, and he's cool. So everyone who isn't subscribed to him already should be subscribed to him. But point being, you you view people like Bounding into Comics or Anglantine or Gary from Neurotic, who I've also done streams with before he blew up and basically forgot the people that gave him his first uh 15 minutes of fame on YouTube, but never mind. Um, but I've done streams and I am friends, or at least on speaking terms, with basically all of the people you've mentioned here, except for maybe like EVS and some other people adjacent to that. But I'm still aware of who they are, and I'm, if we're playing 6 degrees of like Kevin Bacon with somebody like EBS, I'm like I think 3 notches away from him. So yeah, it can be done, and yet I don't get thrown into the into these people are like okay, I guess pile. I get thrown into the political pile because I actually identify one of the major problems with The Last Jedi, which is deconstructionalism and social justice pandering, which apparently you just can't do without being conservative, no matter how left wing your other political beliefs happen to be. Moving on.
Right. Ah, God, I need a new bed. Back's killing me.
Uh-huh. Wasn't there a SpongeBob episode where like Mr. Krabs needed a new bed because he stuck all his money in it?
I'm broke, as
Sorry.
shit, so I can't really say one way or the other.
Right. Sorry. That's just what pops into my head every time you mention that you need a new bed.
It's springs, dude. It's the springs.
Uh-huh.
Granted, I've always had back problems, so it could just be my body too.
That is also true.
You know, when all those older people say, to be young again. Yeah, no, young still kind of sucks. Being young still kind of sucks. No offense.
Yeah, I totally second that opinion. Although in the old people's defense, I'm a weird case because I've always had like the aches and pains that old people tend to complain about by virtue of disability. So yeah. But yeah, being a human occasionally just kind of sucks. That's the nature of what it is to be human. But moving on.
Uh, okay, so we're gonna close this up in 10 minutes, just so everyone knows.
Uh-huh.
We didn't get far, but man of my word.
Yeah, the stupid to content ratio was a lot higher than usual.
Okay. However, in Vito's review, the YouTuber states that one of the flaws of The Last Jedi is that Ryan Johnson uses Laura Dern's character, Vice Admiral Holdo, to compel the audience to trust women, in air quotes. To make this point, Vito invokes criticism against the hashtag #MeToo movement to suggest that asking the audience to trust female characters in power is the same as asking people to trust women who come forward with their stories of sexual assault.
No, 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 no.
I'll be right back.
Ah, there is a difference between women, as in female human beings, as a demographic, and women or womanhood or femininity or feminism as you get in the ideology of feminism. Feminism does not speak for all women. You wart on the ass of the universe. This is exactly your problem. You cannot differentiate the ideological claims made about a given demographic and the demographic themselves, so that when people of a given demographic come to you and say, "I'm sorry, but that ideology does not speak for me, but I am still a valid human being," you come up with things like internalized self-hatred or internalized misogyny to basically explain how that person has Stockholm syndrome and has been cynically turned against their own kind. You thick cunt, sir. Yeah, this is the problem. Admiral Holdo is not just a female character. Nobody has or has ever had a problem with female characters in the entire history of the medium of cinema, okay? What we do have a problem with is ideologically possessed female characters who are basically just avatars of the ideology of feminism. And you cannot just use female bodies or female identities as human shields to shield an ideology. Just like as a gay person, I can call out the excesses within the LGBTQ movement and still be considered a valid human being because the ideology of the LGBTQ movement is not the same as gay people or the gay identity. Okay? Identities are not hive minds, they are not teams, and anyone insinuating that identities should be hive minds or teams are manipulative cunts trying to use other people or themselves as a human shield for an ideology that has nothing to do with any of these things. And therein lies the problem. And incidentally, the accusation of a woman is no more valid than the accusation of a man. And we live in a civilization that, thank the gods, has the presumption of innocence until proven guilty. So an accusation, be it in the court of public opinion or otherwise, should not be enough to get a person's career and their validity as a human being and possibly their right to not be imprisoned taken away until there is actual evidence presented and argument made on the behalf of and against a person who has been accused of something. The accusation is nothing and should be treated as nothing, no matter the identity of the person who is making the accusation. Capisce, sir? Therein lies the problem with hashtag #MeToo. People have this tendency of treating accusations like convictions without any necessity for demonstrable evidence or logic, and therein lies the problem. It's not something that we would allow if a man did it, and therefore it is not something we should allow when women attempt to do it. Despite how gynocentric we are as a species, we need to get it through our thick collective skulls that women are no more pure and no more innocent and no more morally upstanding than anyone the fuck else in existence. And the more we treat women as though they are inherently pure, and we treat men as though they are inherently not pure, the more this double standard grows, and the more the ideology of feminism has ammunition. And the more ammunition the ideology of feminism has to literally get people blacklisted overnight if they feel like it, the more people are going to oppose that ideology. Dumbass. Okay, moving on.
Right.
And yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So he states in the video. Yeah. So they're providing a quote of what was said, what they stated in the paragraph earlier. Okay. So this is from Vito's video. What is moral between the flawed interactions between Holdo and Poe? The most obvious moral is to be subservient to authority and blindly trust your superiors. However, the real moral is the ultimate exercise in jamming politically correct politics into a kids' movie with all the subtle nuance of a bad guy literally named General Grievous. I don't know that last part. I'm not entirely sure I agree with.
He might be exaggerating for the sake of like effect, but I don't think he's wrong
No,
in the case of Admiral Holdo, and that's exactly the point. The creator of this article cannot tell the difference between the ideology of feminism and women as a whole, and he can't see female characters as agents in their own right rather than avatars for the ideology of feminism. And there exactly lies the problem with every female character, or very nearly every female character, in the new Disney Star Wars trilogy. Because rather than being independent beings with their own independent lives and independent thoughts and independent feelings and shit. They are avatars of feminism. And the person who wrote this article seems to define any criticism of feminism as criticism of womankind as a whole. And that's wrong, because feminism does not have a monopoly on speaking for, with, or about women or any other minority group you want to name. And while you read the next part, I'm going to go turn on my light because it's getting dark in here.
Right. Okay. See, Poe thinks he's a better leader than Holdo because he's a man. So he starts mansplaining. But what he really should have done is hashtag trust women, no matter what the situation, even if it seems like that particular woman is about to get you and everyone you love incinerated by a million lasers. Just trust women. She knows what's best. She is living her truth. Hashtag me too. Hashtag time's up. Again, this is from Vito's video, and I'm obviously thinking this is more. He's saying that obviously ironically and stuff. Yeah, we're gonna wait for Dalton real quick.
Okay, yeah. The thing about that part there is he's criticizing the notion that someone should be viewed as more pure or more trustworthy because of their identity or demographic information than because of their merits or the actual logical consistency of what they're asking. Because this is a fundamental issue with feminist ideology. On some level, if a woman says something self-evidently stupid, you cannot criticize her because she is your moral and evaluative better. So no matter what stupid or logically inconsistent thing a woman might ask of you, implied by feminism, you should just do it anyway, because to criticize her is to criticize the hive mind of all womankind. Well, fundamentally, the hive mind of all womankind does not exist. And if a person, irrespective of their demographic qualities, says a stupid thing or a thing that is likely to get many people killed, they should be criticized. Because what matters is not the person making the argument, it matters the structural integrity inherent to the argument itself. See, basically, on this level, what feminism is basically an ad hominem, but it's an ad hominem in the affirmative, which is to say, normally an ad hominem argument is an argument that says this person is wrong because of the kind of person they are. Feminism and many other ideologies adjacent to it do the inverse, i.e., this person must be more valid or more right because of the kind of person they are. And irrespective of whether it's in the negative or the affirmative, you should always look at the argument on its own terms, not the vessel that it came out of, which is what it essentially is.
Mm-hmm. Right, so we are going to call it there.
Huzzah.
Yeah. Didn't get as far as I thought we would, but we spent an hour on it. I'm keeping my word. We are not going to torture ourselves anymore.
Yeah. And there were some interesting tangents this time, so
yeah,
it was worth it.
Been a while since we actually had that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we're just waiting for the next article to load. Yeah, I got nothing to say because honestly, at this point, I do not care about Star Wars. Well, to be the mainstream Star Wars, at least.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, next one. Pretty much Dom sent everything this week, minus the first article.
Uh-huh.
Could not find anything of actual note, which is weird.
Yeah, it was a slow week.
Yeah, we tend to be getting a lot of those lately.
Which means that some week in the near future, there's going to be a week where just everything happens all at once. And we're going to have to decide what to cover.
Right. Okay, so this is from NBCnews.com. Simu Liu, that's the name wrong, I'm sorry. The Asian Marvel superhero emerging at a critical time. This is written by Kimmy Yam. It's published June 1st, 2021. Liu, star of Shang-Chi, said the team aimed to respectfully celebrate the Asian diaspora while drawing on source material written by two white men at the height of the Kung Fu craze.
Okay, here's problem number one. A lot of Asian people like the Kung Fu craze. They find it to actually be an interesting and compelling portrayal of their culture. And this is exactly why Shang-Chi is a bland waste of a nothing. Because you can't actually touch on the interesting comic book weirdness that can be unlocked when you play with Shang-Chi. Because you're trying to do Shang-Chi without putting any focus at all, or at least the very most minimal amount of focus, on any of the cool comic booky kung fu shit that makes Shang-Chi at all interesting. Because you had to put the ideology of the Asian hive mind, quote unquote, above making an actual interesting concept for a movie. And as a result, the movie you ended up with is not interesting. And even China dislikes it as a result of this because they can tell they're being haphazardly and wrongheadedly pandered to and they don't like it. In fact, they much more like Doctor Strange because Doctor Strange is very much based on the same kind of Eastern mysticism and it actually attempts to embrace said Eastern mysticism, which means because a lot of them actually do like that sort of thing, they ended up liking it, which is why the place that Doctor Strange made the most money actually was in China. It only made like 270 some million domestically, but it made like 440 million in internationally, and like 80% of that was China because they actually like the mystical qualities of their culture, even if the CCP themselves would rather they didn't, because they're fucking communists and communists hate religion because they can't use religion to control people. Moving on.
Yeah. Okay. As a generation of Asian Americans shaped by the hardships quietly endured by their parents, the heartbreak in their long-held chase to feel belonging, and the discrimination experienced during the pandemic call for the recognition of their plight. The emergence of an Asian superhero is no insignificant thing.
Yeah, but unfortunately, that Asian superhero is neutered of everything that makes the character interesting, and therefore it is likely to bomb because you didn't make an interesting movie out of it. Because you decided to put ideology ahead of meritocracy, and as a result, you ended up with something bland and shitty. Moving on.
Right. Simi. All right, I read that. Yeah, no, okay. Simi Liu, who portrays the warrior Shang-Chi in Marvel's first Asian superhero movie, the upcoming Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, said he's up for the challenge. Okay. But with the glory that comes with this role is also the question of whether his character, who is literally referred to in the decades-old source material as the master of Kung Fu, will be able to humanize a culture rather than fall into a flattened martial arts trope Asian Americans have too often been regulated to in Hollywood. Okay, for one thing, you motherfuckers made the movie, made the CW reboot of Kung Fu.
Yeah.
And
second of all, being portrayed as someone with a large degree of skill in an obscure skill set is not negative. Okay. Compared to all the other cultures and all the other stereotypes of all the different cultures you could possibly have, wouldn't you rather be considered a master of kung fu? Like, for example, the Irish are often treated like drunks. Um, the Russians are portrayed as overly self-serious and overly like aggressive, and also often drunks. Um, Nerds, I mean, do we even need to talk about how nerds have been portrayed basically since time immemorial? Um, and pick a pick a people, and I can almost guarantee you that whatever stereotypes exist about that people are going to be more insulting than the Asian stereotype of Asians being good at kung fu. Not to mention, there are quite a lot of Asians that enjoy their culture being associated so heavily with martial arts and actively engage in martial arts specifically because of that reason. Are you telling me that you're honestly going to prevent an Asian kid from liking something along the lines of Big Trouble in Little China? And if so, why on earth would you do such a thing? The thing about the Kung Fu craze is it was awesome, irrespective of your identity. And quite frankly, it was better representation than a lot of other cultures were getting at the time. So are you literally going to wring out everything that makes Shang-Chi Shang-Chi just so you don't have to engage with a quote unquote stereotype, no matter how valid that stereotype might be, and no matter how awesome the results might be for the quality of the movie you're making? Moving on.
yeah, okay. Liu, who's just weeks off filming the finale of the trailblazing Asian Canadian sitcom Kim's Convenience, and currently promoting a partnership with No Hope Kid Hungry, explained the team wasn't afraid to depart from any elements of the source material. It was a worthy trade off, he said, if it meant adding depth to an Asian story, something the community has been demanding amid dangerous pandemic stereotypes that have sometimes translated into violence.
I'm going to need to see evidence of that violence before I can believe that it exists, because I have as yet seen no evidence of that violence.
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I very much doubt that anyone is blaming Chinese people for the actions of the CCP. Because the CCP are once again a bunch of communist cunts and they can fuck off. But the people of China and Chinese Americans and Asian Americans in general and so on are awesome and they're cool. So, yeah.
Mm-hmm. We knew that we were potentially navigating a minefield, especially when looking at this property that was created by two white men in the 1970s at the height of the Kung Fu craze. Okay, for one thing, to be fair, the Kung Fu craze did paint Asians in a pretty good light by making, like, you had Bruce Lee, Jackie Chan, and a few, Michelle Yeoh.
Yeah, again, your stereotype is essentially you are badasses with a particular set of skills that you may or may not have,
Which is to this day, you know?
Yeah, which is better than 90% of the other stereotypes that anyone else ever gets. Like, for example, Brainstormer. How many times have you had to deal with a sleepy Hispanic stereotype in a movie or a show or whatever?
I don't know. I was probably sleeping at the time when I was watching them.
um, and we've all had to deal with nerd stereotypes basically since time immemorial because nerds have always, you know, until round about the late 80s, they got the shit end of the stick. And even then, there were characters like Steve Urkel, who is probably the worst nerd stereotype I've ever seen. Or Screech from Saved by the Bell as another example of nerd stereotype. But Asians, they get either classed as you know, kung fu badasses like Bruce Lee, or mystical badasses like Mr. Miyagi, or a little bit of both. And quite frankly, compared to all the other stereotypes, I would gladly take the "I am a badass with a badass set of skills" stereotype a thousand times out of 10.
Right.
Not to mention the kung fu craze produced a lot of good movies. Granted, there were some movies that were crap, but in every genre and every subgenre of thing, there's going to be some percentage that's going to be crap and some percentage that's going to be decent.
Yeah, that's just movies in general, or entertainment, I guess.
Yeah. Basically, any kind of art, there's going to be some that are great, and there are going to be some that make you roll your eyes and make you want to bang your head into a wall.
There's only one movie in modern day that makes me want to do that I actually care about.
The second Tom Holland Spider-Man movie?
Actually, no. Surprisingly. A sequel to one of my favorite movies made by your favorite director.
Pacific Rim Uprising.
Yep, that is really the only movie in all my years of movie watching that has ever actually made me disappointed.
That's
truly
that is definitely a fair a fair one for that to be a breaking point on.
Yeah.
Because
not even Far From Home did that to me, and I despise that movie.
Yes, which is why that was my first guess.
Yeah.
Because I know how you feel about Spider-Man Far From Home, and therefore that was a decent guess.
I don't remember what podcast it was. You guys can look through our back catalog, but there's a podcast where I talk about it at length.
Yeah, I've never seen him quite get so fired up about anything until we got into the topic of Far From Home, and then it was like opening the gates of hell. Granted, I have no room to talk because I get that way about kind of everything on some level. But that's what made it so special when Brainstormer did it finally. It was like, oh, so this is his breaking point. Noted for later.
I'm not getting into it right now just because we'd be here all night. Anyway.
Yeah. Moving on.
Yeah. The YouTube NBC Asian America. We have not shied away from ripping out whatever doesn't work in 2019, 2020, 2021.
According to whose standards? Because this is the thing.
Hold on. Now, I'd be willing, because this seems, Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, it seems like they are kind of building their own thing, which is what the MCU does. It takes inspiration, but it makes its own thing, mostly.
Mm-hmm.
I'm fine with that. With the fact that Shang-Chi does seem to be the son of the Mandarin, which is very interesting. I don't think it's actually in the comics.
Right.
And
in the comics, he's the son of Fu Manchu, but I understand why they kind of 86 Fu Manchu, because while I am a little bit tenuous when it comes to chalking everything up to stereotypes and bad representation and so on, with Fu Manchu, there's actually a point. So, yeah.
I'm fine if they're willing to change something, as long as it makes the story either better or work in context of the story.
Yeah. If it's as good or better than the source material, then everything is fine. The
I'm
problem, however, is that because of this ideological insistence you have of seeing anything resembling kung fu stereotype as inherently bad, you seem to have removed all of the interesting shit. And if you make a movie with all of the interesting shit removed, then far be it from me not to be interested in that thing.
You know what would have been interesting, and like this was a whole big thing when the Marvel Netflix show came out. But Iron Fist, what if they made Iron Fist a movie instead? Like same actor and everything, I'd be fine with. Granted, again, that's more on the topic of the merit of the actor that's playing Danny Rand, Iron Fist.
Yeah. And I wouldn't care either.
Yeah.
There's a part of me that would think it was a bit of a cop out because of how many people lost their shit over Iron Fist being casted as a white guy, even though that's kind of the whole point is that he's a fish out of water. But that's a different story.
But I'm also saying, like, if you had also gotten like a black man, again, like it's more on the topic of
depending on the merit and qualifications of the actor, who cares? And if we could get an Iron Fist movie that happened to have an Asian lead or a black lead or whomever, and it meant that I could have Shao Lao the Undying or the Seven Capital Cities of Heaven or any of the other weird mystical stuff that's in the Iron Fist lore, then I would sign up for that. And
also, like, really tap into the lore, by the way, because the show sucked because it took out a lot of interesting points of Iron Fist.
Yeah, and here we are again with basically the same problem. In an effort to make the IP less offensive, quote unquote, to the ideological standards that they are imposing upon the movie, not that were imposed on the movie, but that they personally are imposing on the movie, they've cut out all the interesting shit. And there exactly in lies the problem. If you got it out of your head that kung fu inherently was bad in this context, and you just made a really, really badass kung fu movie with Marvel backing and Marvel mysticism involved, that would be an interesting movie. But because you, for some reason, have got it in your head that any reference to kung fu in relation to Asian people is bad, no matter how many Asian people like it and would actually prefer to see it, you then have to remove all the interesting shit. But let's take that out of contention for a second, because it is Hollywood, and I understand that this is the ideology that Hollywood plays with. But this still doesn't explain, in any meaningful sense, where are the Mandarin's interesting cosmic or mystical qualities? Where's Hypnotia? Where's MODOK? Where's Fin Fang Foom? Where is the veritable cast of basically rejected Power Rangers villains that the Mandarin has as henchmen? Why is he just a businessman rather than a alien techno wizard overlord character? Basically, he's a male version of Rita Repulsa from Power Rangers if they did them right. So where is all that stuff? If we can't have any of the interesting kung fu mysticism because something stereotype, where is the Mandarin's cool shit? And that's missing too, and therein lies part of the problem. Now, granted, things take time to render, and we may be eating our words come the actual release of the first trailer for Shang-Chi, because the first one was just a teaser. But much in the same way as with Eternals, if I see an Eternals trailer that has a fuck ton of color and Kirbyism and Celestials in it, I will retract every negative thing I have said about Eternals. But until we actually see some effort to make the interesting parts of the material translate to the screen, then they are missing as far as we have them now. Okay? And therein lies the problem. Moving forward.
I also looked at the history of Shang-Chi, yeah, it's an early life. So I'm looking at this on like the fandom website,
Right.
Okay. Everything we did not see in the teaser or trailer, whatever the fuck you want to call it.
Mhm.
Shang was raised to become a deadly assassin by his father, the immortal crime lord and sorcerer Fu Manchu. However, Shang-Chi became aware of his father's evil nature and defected after his first assignment. He then began to attack various elements of his father's criminal empire and allied himself with his father's archenemy, Dennis Nayland Smith in MI6. In retaliation, Fu Manchu sent a number of assassins to kill him.
Yeah. Now, obviously, they're swapping out the Mandarin for Fu Manchu, which honestly is probably a pretty smart choice. But the basic gist of all of that could make for a really interesting movie, and also would have been true to the material. But no, we get none of that.
To be fair, they have the assassins, sure,
Uh-huh.
but that's
But they're not given any sort of context, and the assassins that Fu Manchu sent after them were tricked out with sorcery and every other thing. So they had interesting powers. It was again, it was kind of like um Big Trouble in Little China meets Wu Assassin from Netflix.
Oh, I said superheroes, but yeah, that makes more sense. I need to watch Assassins, honestly.
It is a really good show. It honestly, I wish it had gotten a season 2, but it didn't.
Right, but yeah, let's keep going because we have a lot more to cover.
Yeah, material.
Yeah. He added, from the moment that Marvel Studios decided that there needed to be a voice for Asian characters and a lead Asian character in the space of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they have all kind of considered what the best way was to incorporate a story that both celebrates Asianness in all of its wonderful dimensions and its facets and its nuances, and also celebrates martial arts. Yeah, kind of not doing that though, from what we saw.
Yeah, you've removed all of the martial artsness because for some reason you believe erroneously that no Asian has ever enjoyed the fact that their culture is represented as very kung fu heavy in movies and stuff.
Well, also, isn't there the thing like in actual like Asian uh, culture that there's like Tai Chi and
Yeah, there's Tai Chi, there's Taoism,
right, yeah,
there's
or like
yeah,
it's not even really about fighting. It's more of just finding. Uh, well, it is about exercise and stuff, but
yeah. It's about the flow of a person's energy basically.
yeah,
Um,
which involves mysticism and stuff. Which, to be honest, I don't know a lot about. I know broad strokes, certainly of Asian culture. I've just never really. I'll be honest. I kind of grew up more with quote unquote black or urban culture, I suppose.
uh-huh.
So I know more about that.
I know a little bit about Asian culture from like watching various historical documentaries, and then of course I know a little bit about Eastern mysticism because I know a little bit about basically every kind of mysticism because magic is my thing and I've been studying it for 15 freaking years. But that being said, Eastern mysticism is very difficult and very complicated, so I am not entirely comfortable with saying I am in any way an expert on such things. But even so, there is the philosophies that guide Asian culture, if you want to call it that, are so integral to Asian culture that do anything resembling Asian culture without touching on Taoist philosophy or Eastern mysticism is kind of missing so much of the point. And also, while we're here, because we missed one very important thing, and I think it's important that we draw attention to it. There is no such thing as Asianness. None.
and
Asian people are not a collective. They're not a hive mind.
as
There
much
are
as the
many,
Chinese
many
government wants
different.
to believe,
Hmm?
as much as the Chinese government wants that to be so.
Yeah, as much as China would very much, or the Chinese government would very much like for their culture to be the one and true only Asian culture, it is not so. I mean, just look at Japan for fuck's sake.
Mhm.
And I know this is wrong now because you can't do this, otherwise it pisses off China, and John Cena will have to come out and apologize. But look at Tibet. Look at the various Asian cultures that are influenced by Shintoism and Buddhism. So much actual ideological diversity is found within Eastern mysticism and Asian culture that you cannot call anything meaningfully Asianist, even if there were such a thing as an Asian hive mind, which there fucking isn't. And herein lies the problem once again. What are you going to do with all of the Asian people who actually like the fact that their culture is portrayed as being very philosophy and mysticism heavy, or likes kung fu, or likes the weird mystical qualities of um, something like Shang-Chi, or something that was born out of the kung fu craze? You're basically telling them to fuck right off. And the Chinese people, very ironically indeed, have internalized that message and therefore are not anticipating Shang-Chi, which is probably going to come back and bite you square in the ass come come release date time, because if China doesn't like all this Chinese pandering you're doing and you didn't otherwise make a decent movie for other people to watch, then you are in danger of Shang-Chi coming out bust there, which is going to be hilarious to me, especially when Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness comes out a couple months later and does gangbusters in China, because it actually does embrace the mysticism that China actually seems to like in their movies. But I will gloat about that as and when we are um, sitting in March of 2022.
Mhm.
Yeah.
You pointed out that Shang-Chi's arc was introduced into the Marvel franchise by writer Steve Englehart and artist Jim Starlin in December 1973. Wow. Huh.
Okay, you leave Steve Englehart the fuck out of this,
Also,
sirs and madams.
also
Sorry.
Jim Starlin.
Yeah.
Uh,
And well, I was making a particular point about Steve Englehart because he actually wrote my favorite run of Doctor Strange.
right.
Um,
This is- Also, I wanted to just make sure this is the guy who is playing Shang-Chi who's saying this. So, okay, it's just
yeah.
um, should I just go off top and see?
Okay.
Yeah, Liu pointed out that Shang-Chi's arc was introduced into the Marvel franchise by writer Steve Englehart and artist Jim Starlin in December 1973, a time when the term Asian American was only in its genesis and interpretations of Asian people were limited to reductive portrayals like the sexually deviant Dang Hooker from Vietnam War movie Full Metal Jacket. Even though Kung Fu had gained widespread popularity in the West, those who were responsible for popularizing it were not always respected or given appropriate recognition.
Bullshit, sir. The Karate Kid, every Bruce Lee movie,
Jack,
um,
every Jackie Chan movie. Wait, no, wait. Was he in the 70s or was that?
Jackie showed up a little bit later, so I'm not sure he counts. But
Okay, but sorry. No, I just want to.
yeah.
Sorry.
But irrespective of that, bullshit. Yes, there was the stereotype of Asian women being submissive and frisky, but there was also the stereotype of the old Asian master of kung fu that could kick anyone's ass basically whenever they felt like it, um, and so on. So yeah, no, this is the very essence of cherry picking to prove your point when your point would be contradicted by literally every other example possible to give. So fuck you entirely. But back to my rant, because you do not have any leeway, at least not in my mind, to speak ill of Steve Englehart, sir or madam, because Steve Englehart is one of the most awesome writers ever to work in comics, in my opinion. He's one of the great unsung heroes of the Silver Age of comics, quite frankly. He wrote my favorite run of Doctor Strange, and incidentally, that probably had a lot to do with why he was tasked with writing Shang-Chi, because it had been shown that he was good at writing Asian influenced mysticism, which Doctor Strange is very much based on. And incidentally, Steve Ditko, the guy that created Doctor Strange, was a freaking Buddhist at the time that he made the character. So I don't even want to hear about that either. So it's not as though people wrote Asian or kung fu based characters with no understanding of Eastern like mysticism or Asian culture. In fact, a lot of the eccentric motherfuckers that wrote for comics back in the day were also philosophically eccentric and weird, and often did their own independent research. Like for example, Steve Ditko trying to square um, Randian objectivism, which is something he also believed in, with Buddhism, which he experimented with at the time. So, point being, it's not simply a matter of the identity of the person involved. It has to do with their understanding of the source material or the philosophies based on, or the philosophies that underpin the source material, which many of the people writing for comics at the time actually did have. And if you weren't so myopically obsessed with identity, you would know that and would therefore have no problem with people like Steve Englehart. But I digress. Moving on.
Yeah. We saw David Carradine, who is not of Asian descent, playing an Asian man on the show Kung Fu that originally should have and was developed for Bruce Lee. Liu said of the '70s series in which Carradine was cast as Kwai Chang Caine, a Shaolin monk, to have that be the legacy that quote unquote inspired Shang-Chi in the beginning honestly doesn't put us off to a great start. Okay, fuck off. Okay, that's inspiration. Okay, and I've made plenty of characters that are different from the original incarnations based on the inspiration of those characters and people.
Also, once again, just undermining your whole premise here, in the 70s, the time period you were talking about, a series was created specifically for Bruce Lee. So how the fuck exactly can you get away with saying there was no respect for anyone of Asian descent or their understanding of kung fu when when a writer literally wrote a concept for a pilot with Bruce Lee specifically in mind? And never mind the fact that Bruce Lee got his start on the Green Hornet series, which predated this by about a decade.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess that's too inconvenient for the freaking narrative now, isn't it?
All right, yeah, which again, I've always kind of assumed Shang-Chi from everything I've been able to look up on him. Granted, that has been much because I don't really care enough about the movie to really care about the character, which is unfortunate because after I just read that, I was very interested in him.
Yeah, if you actually played the character where the character lies and use the potential that the character actually has, you could basically do Marvel's equivalent to something like Big Trouble in Little China. And it would be awesome because it would be Shang-Chi versus the Mandarin, with the Mandarin being this warlord techno wizard from space with a cast of villains that wouldn't be out of place in Power Rangers up against Shang-Chi empowered by all the weird kung fu mysticism of the Marvel universe, which some of which you could borrow from Iron Fist, considering that you're probably not going to be using it for anything else, and I wouldn't actually mind because it does fit the character. But that would require you actually understanding and caring about what the material actually is.
Yeah. The current state of Hollywood reveals an unfortunate continued legacy of not only woefully underdeveloped Asian characters, but oftentimes complete erasure. In a recent study, researchers looked at 79 primary and secondary Asian American or Pacific Islander characters across the top films of 2019. There, do you have anything to say to that?
Not sure.
I'll continue. Maybe you have some. Their evaluation revealed that while portrayals of AAPI characters uh, ranged from invisible to fully human, defined as having a full spectrum of relationships, most fell into the categories of silent, stereotyped, tokenized, isolated, and sidekicks or villains.
Okay, and how many people who are actually Asian or Pacific Islander like those characters? This is the variable that you completely seem to be erasing here, because apparently it doesn't matter to you how many Asian people actually like these characters, or aspire to be like these characters, or were inspired by these characters, because you want to serve the Asian hive mind, quote unquote, rather than actually talking to and valuing the opinions of actual Asian people, you dumbasses. Because I can almost guarantee you that if there were ever any people who were racist toward Asians, Bruce Lee went a fuck of a long way to deconverting those people. Because irrespective of what you may think of Asian people as a whole, Bruce Lee and Jackie Chan are fucking badasses. And they should be respected as fucking badasses. How many kids from the 70s were inspired by Mr. Miyagi? Or the 70s and 80s were inspired by Mr. Miyagi or some other character similar to that? How many people, binge watched Big Trouble in Little China specifically because of um Wang, who I believe is the Asian character, the like main the Wong to Jack Burton's main character, um, or Egg Shen, who was basically the main character in that movie, by the way. And he was the most like wise old and mystical character in that entire movie. The movie freaking opens with him, for fuck's sake, and yet in your minds, none of those characters that would have inspired actual Asian people or would have inspired non-Asian people to respect Asian people more are good Asian characters because reasons. Dumbass. Yeah, and this is entirely the problem that always comes up with social justice as an idea or as an ideology. They care more about what they think the collective of a given identity should think than they do about what the demographic identity actually does think. And when they find someone in that demographic who disagrees with their worldview or their definition of what Asianness is or what any identity is, they claim that those people have been cynically turned against their own kind and actually hate themselves and have Stockholm syndrome. Which they don't understand how invalidating that is. Because it basically implies that if you don't agree with what we say about you academically, you must not be a true person of your demographic. You if you disagree with feminism, you must not be a true woman. If you disagree with LGBTQ movement, you must not be a true gay person. If you disagree with um Black Lives Matter, you must not be a true black person, etc. And they don't understand how hypocritical and frankly dehumanizing that is to say, if you don't hold these particular beliefs or these particular ideas, then you don't get to claim to be the kind of person you are anymore. Because you must hate yourself secretly. Because we know what goes on in your head better than you do. Yeah. I hate this shit so much. Moving on.
Right. Okay. And looking at the top grossing films over a 13-year span, just 44 films had an AAPI lead. In 14 of these films, Dwayne The Rock Johnson, who is of Samoan descent, occupied the lead role. Okay? That's just
Yeah.
because it's The Rock.
Yeah, because The Rock is awesome, irrespective of his race, gender, or any fucking thing else.
Yeah. I'm assuming one of the characters is Mako from Pacific Rim, who honestly should have been the lead. I'm thinking that's a lot of like fans.
Opinions, yeah, I would agree.
She's badass, and she works well with Riley in the movie. And it's just a really cool film, and it's actually a pretty diverse fucking group of characters.
Yep.
It's also a mecha movie, which you never really get.
Yeah. Giant robots are always a win, and giant monsters are always a win. And giant robots fighting giant monsters will always and forever be a win, unless you are stupid enough to be Pacific Rim Uprising, that somehow managed to make that not work.
Well, I'm done. I'm not talking about it. I'm good. But yeah, no. The Rock gets the roles because he's The Rock, and he's a pretty good star, actually.
Yeah,
Really good roles, to be fair.
he has the skills and the likability to play a lot of interesting characters that a lot of people like, and therefore he gets more work.
Mm-hmm. Also, isn't there like to name one that isn't like an action star character? Which, to be fair, anyone gets put in those movies, regardless of race. But you guys remember? Ladon, you might know because well, this show seems like up your alley. Modern Family.
Yes.
You get the implied joke there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Also, fuck you, but I love you.
Yeah. No, Lily. Lily. How was it? Yeah, Lily, the daughter of Cam and Mitchell.
Yeah.
Really cool character. Not gonna lie. Just sassy, and I like it. I've only seen like a few episodes, and mainly I just like enjoyed her mostly
Mm-hmm.
because again she was pretty cool. But again, my point stands is that to me, I just saw her as like this sassy young kid who fit in like with this family of weirdos.
Yeah.
Again, my point obviously being that I don't. It's no one really cares about what the character actually looks like, more on how they're portrayed than anything.
Yeah. The demographics of a person is not what makes a person interesting. The qualities, interest, personality, and skills of a person is generally what makes a person interesting. And that's how it should be, quite frankly.
Yeah.
I don't want to be known as just the Asian crippled guy or just a gay crippled guy. I would like to be known as the guy who knows things about various things and the guy who, has various interests and things that people actually find interesting. And I'm sure Brainstormer doesn't just want to be known as the inner city Hispanic guy. He would like probably to be known primarily as a writer, if I'm not mistaken, because that's Brainstormer.
Yep.
Yeah. So, point being, the thing that makes a person interesting and also makes a character interesting has nothing to do with their demographics. That doesn't mean that the demographics never can add intrigue to a person or never can make a character, at least on paper, seem interesting.
Right.
Like if a person is a kind of person that we've never seen before, then by all means, sure. But like
Wow.
it's not the primary motivator of what makes people interested in things.
Mm-hmm. I didn't want to bring up Blue Marvel, you know, but I don't think that's really necessary. So,
Right.
Okay, shall we?
Yep. Moving on.
Against the backdrop of such a landscape, Liu said he's had to interrogate his own complicated relationship with martial arts. He admitted that at times he's used it as an entryway into acting. Do you say that like it's a bad thing? What
Yeah, there's bum fucking nothing wrong with that. If you have any skill that's interesting enough to make a decent segue into acting, then
Okay,
all the more power to you, as far as I'm concerned.
okay. I feel like I gotta bring this up. So I watched this. There's this channel on YouTube called Corridor. Used to be known as Corridor Digital. They're like really like a filmmaking channel.
Mm-hmm.
Really amazing. The guys have been around since like maybe 2010 or so,
Mm-hmm.
and have become basically like this giant. Well, not giant, but have become like their own independent film studio now because they didn't. I brought them up once before because of like Hollywood and stuff. They haven't really been able to work on their ideas without like interference from Hollywood.
Mm-hmm.
So they decided to go independent. And they have this secondary channel called Corridor Crew, which is like behind the scenes and stuff where you really get to like know them and talk and like see them as people and stuff. It's really cool. And they have these like React series where like they bring people in from the industry, so they can talk about the tricks and trades as they review like action scenes or CGI, animation, stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I mostly watch like stuntman reacts because me. And I like action.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not something I've noted. It's not. I didn't really notice it before, but I feel like I kind of have to bring it up here. And I hate to bring it up, but like all these skilled stuntsmen and stuntwomen that that have been shown on the show and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They've been in the industry for like 10, 20 years at this point. And they talk about how hard it is, a lot of the problems, and just also how fun it is also to be like working in stunts and stuff, and the dangers of it, obviously.
Yeah.
But most of them are. I've mostly seen like black guys and women. There was an Asian woman on there. But no, they speak about the experiences that they've had as stuntmen working in the industry of stunts, and it's really interesting. But the thing that never really occurred to me is they are a diverse group of hardworking individuals, maybe even more so than the actors.
Yeah. In a lot of modern action movies, the stunt people do all the work, and the actors just kind of come in between scenes whenever there's a dialogue moment or something.
That's not saying that there aren't actors who can do who can do their own stunts, because there are. But granted, most Hollywood studios don't want to do that because it's too dangerous and too risky for the money and all that.
Yeah, if we lose our golden goose over a stunt, then we're fucked. But if we just have this person do it or that person do it, then we're not out much.
Yeah, stuntman's life kind of sucks, to be honest. I mean, like, they have unions and stuff to get that handled better, but still, those guys get hurt sometimes. Like, they tear.
Their jobs is basically put yourself in danger for a living.
I mean, to be fair, it was a lot worse back then, like in the 70s and stuff, because there was actually,
yes, it was so much worse because there wasn't quite so much unionization or as much care about what happened to the stuntmen. But even so, like, yeah, the job of a stuntman is basically put yourself in danger for a living and give the credit to someone else.
Mm-hmm. But again, what I'm trying to say is you have an actor like Jackie Chan, like Jet Li, like Bruce Lee, as he's going to bring up, that can do their own stunts, are competent, and basically have built the career on being action stars. They are action stars, and I think this is what Mr. Liu is forgetting.
Yeah, it's a good thing to have the skills of martial arts. I wish I had to have the skills at martial arts. Like seriously, martial arts are cool.
Yeah, and
I-
I'll bring this up when we get there. But there's thing with Jackie Chan, and I'll mention in like his differing opinions of of like Hollywood and Hong Kong movie.
Mhm.
I'll get there. Shall we continue?
We shall.
Okay. I grew up loving Jackie Chan and Jet Li and certainly Bruce Lee, you said, but as I got older, I started to question, is that all we have? Is that all the world sees in us? That hold on. That is the only value that we have, particularly in the entertainment industry. Okay, please.
As though that would be a bad thing? The fuck?
I mean, okay, and hear me out. I'm sorry, like if I'm cutting you off on. Um, the thing is though, to be fair, like a lot of Hong Kong movies and Asian action movies tend to have better stories than most other films from other countries.
Mm-hmm.
You know, like you got Ip Man with Donnie Yen, which is like it's a historical fiction of the Yip Man who trained Bruce Lee.
Mm-hmm.
I want it. It's been a while since I've seen this movie, Crouch the Tiger, Hidden Dragon. So I don't really remember what the plot of that movie was.
Yeah, it's been a minute for me too. I don't really remember the plot much either.
Yeah, I want to say The Raid, like the Raid movies. They're simplistic in their storytelling, but it works. The action itself, which again I think is a big issue with like American cinema in terms of action movies, is they treat the fight scene as part of the story, and like there's stories within the fight scene themselves, which I wish a lot more American filmmakers would take into
Account.
take into account. But when I was thinking of Jackie Chan, what I was going to say with Jackie Chan is he had mentioned in his movie, like when he was doing his Hong Kong movies, right, is like the little details that he adds to the scenes. Like when he like twirls a fan in the air and catches it, or like kicks a pencil in the air and catches it.
Mm-hmm.
Little minute details that are cool, but you don't really pay attention to because you focus more on like the big action set pieces.
Right.
Is he takes his time. Like they literally in Hong Kong, apparently, like they give you the money and then you're allowed to do what you want, and like they give you enough time to do so to make that movie just right, instead of like having a real set deadline.
Mm-hmm.
Where basically Jackie Chan is able to do hundreds of takes of the same scene over and over to get it just right.
Mm-hmm.
And like I believe the quote, I might paraphrase it, so forgive me, and someone be willing to correct me if I get it, if it's not directly right. Is he mentions that someone says like Jackie is so good when they see that trick done in the movie, but it's not good. It's just he took it. You can do it too. Question is, do you have the patience to do so?
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass, basically, is the long and the short of it.
Yeah. My long haul is that you're taking time, and again, that has nothing to do with his Asianness, is what I'm getting across. It's more of a commitment to the movie or the story that is being told within the movie or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Which, again, I wish would be taken into consideration with Hollywood in their work.
Well, yeah, but there's a lot of problems with Hollywood that need to be undone before we even get to a place where that would be possible.
Well, to be fair, Jackie Chan doesn't really like working with the American, working with Hollywood on the fact that I believe in an interview he said it's more about the money than the craft.
Uh-huh. Which it
True.
is mostly true, so yeah, I agree.
Yeah. But yeah, like movies that like Jackie Chan, Jet Li, and Bruce Lee worked on, even like in Hollywood, were good. Not from just an action point of view, but also like a story most of the time. I mean, sure, they could be simplistic, but they still worked. You know?
Mm-hmm.
I got nothing else. Do you have anything?
No, we can move forward.
Okay. He underscored, however, that a heavy use of martial arts elements and a layered, sophisticated interpretation of an Asian story are not mutually exclusive. After all, storyline, birthed from those outside of the culture, has now been placed in the hands of people who know it well, including Asian.
Okay. Here's the thing. There are people, I am sure they exist, in Asian culture who know nothing about the philosophy or the practical aspects of martial arts. And there are people in the Western world who, despite being Western people, know quite a great deal about martial arts and the philosophy behind it. The knowledge and skill a person has at something does not have anything whatsoever to do with their demographic information. It has to do with whether or not they're willing to do motherfucking research. And the fact that you are insinuating that only someone of a given demographic can know anything about a given aspect of a different culture completely erases the power of research and understanding of things. Would you rather have a director who was Asian, who knows nothing about Kung Fu and nothing about the philosophies behind Kung Fu? Or would you rather someone who is a master of Kung Fu and the philosophies behind it, who happens to be white? Because I know which answer I would go with. Hell, the person I know who knows the most about Kung Fu is a black person. His name is Mr. E2099, or his YouTube moniker rather is Mr. E2099, and he is awesome. He's like a third-degree black belt or some shit. Would you tell my friend Mr. E2099 that he couldn't direct a kung fu movie because he's not Asian? Or would it just apply to white guys? And if the answer is it would just apply to white guys, then do you not see how that's a teeny bit racist, for one? And if it would apply to someone like Mr. E with black, then what the actual fuck, please? Because again, and it works for basically any culturally stereotypical skill. Like there are white people who know more about voodoo than a black person, even a black person from New Orleans sometimes, and so on. So the question is, do you rather want someone who understands the philosophies and material behind something, or do you want someone who has the appropriate biology of someone from that culture? Because in my opinion, it's much more important to get someone who actually knows the ins and outs of that culture and that philosophy and that skill than it is to get someone with the right demographic information. There may very well be a bunch of people who have both the right skills and the right demographic information, but why the fuck are you discriminating based on race and demographic information if what you're actually looking for is skill and knowledge? That is the important question. Moving on.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let's see. He underscored, however, that a heavy use of martial arts elements and I already read it. Sorry.
Mhm.
Okay. Including Asian American director Destin Daniel Creighton, he said. Liu insisted the film still honors an age-old Asian art form, but also makes room for a web of faces, personalities, and, most importantly, heroes. Okay, you're acting like other Asian movies haven't done that, though.
Or other kung fu movies. Have you ever seen a Bruce Lee movie? Every character in your average Bruce Lee movie is full and rounded. Thank you very the fuck
Uh,
much.
oh, you remember? Do you remember? I still remember the fight scene between him and Chuck Norris.
Oh yeah, yeah, I remember that.
Two very respectful warriors
Yeah,
willing to fight each other in the ancient Roman Colosseum.
yeah,
I did not mention the races. That right there, everything I just pitched before I mentioned the race thing, is
yeah,
enough to make you watch.
yeah.
Also, Chuck Norris without a beard is weird. Also, like he was so young too.
Yeah.
Moving on.
Yeah.
We have a lot of heroes. We have Asian heroes. We have Asian American heroes, men, women of all ages, and not all of them do martial arts. He said, but that doesn't mean that they won't have their own arcs, their own stories, their own subtleties, sub subtleties and nuances. And I think that's what's important. Yeah, again, you're acting like nothing, no other film has done that.
Yeah, and you're also acting like you can't have weird kung fu mysticism and also still have that. Off the top of my head, once again, Big Trouble in Little China. Are you implying that Egg Shen from Big Trouble in Little China doesn't have a full rounded character? Are you implying that Wang from Big Trouble in Little China doesn't have a full round? Are you implying that any Jackie Chan movie doesn't have a full rounded character? Or any Bruce Lee movie doesn't have a full rounded character just because it's very heavily focused on kung fu based mysticism? Because if you are implying that, then you are a dumbass. This is the problem. You basically exorcised Shang-Chi of everything that made Shang-Chi interesting on the grounds that to associate with those things would be insulting to Asianness, quote unquote. And now you're saying that just because you did that, that doesn't mean that those things will be absent from the movie, even though you explicitly exorcised them from the movie. Dumbass.
Oh, it gets
Yep.
better.
Oh god.
Well, no, please finish.
Moving on.
I mean, if you want to finish your thought, please finish your thought.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay. It also helps, you said, that some questionable elements from the source material, like the shape-shifting dragon, like being puzzlingly named Ding Fang Foom, do not make an appearance in the movie. It's a shape-shifting dragon. I think, plus the name doesn't really sound that offensive, to be honest. Like, in my opinion, at least.
What in the interdimensional tunneling fuck are you playing at? Why on Earth or anywhere else in the multiverse is Ding Fang Foom puzzling or problematic?
Well, the name, at least.
He's an alien dragon creature. Are we really scraping the bottom of this particular barrel so hard that not even an alien dragon creature can have a weird name
Hey,
now?
Dalton. Example, Starfire. You get what I mean?
Yeah, but still.
People are still stupid. It's not really that.
But do you see now why this ideological pandering is a problem? Not talking to you, Brandon. We're talking to the asshole who made the article and to Simu Liu apparently. Do you see Mr. Liu?
Oh no, that's the guy who's playing Shang-Chi.
Right, Simu Liu. Do you see now, Mr. Liu, why we are concerned when you put this moralistic ideological pandering ahead of making a good movie? Because Fin Fang Foom, thank you very much, is an awesome and interesting aspect of the weird mystical kung fu nature of the Marvel Universe, and you've exorcised him completely for ideological reasons that actively cripple your movie.
Mm-hmm.
That single-handedly almost wiped out my entire interest in seeing this movie, just so you know. Because one of the interesting things about when the Mandarin shows up is Fing Fang Foom isn't far behind, and here he makes even more sense because it's kung fu focused because Shang-Chi, and I still can't get Fing Fang Foom because you arbitrarily decided that he is offensive to a hive mind of Asianness that I will remind you, you have asked no one but your own self-imposed guilt whether it's offensive or not.
Right.
And just so we're aware, just so we're clear, just because you have a weird self-imposed hatred of your own culture, Mr. Liu, does not mean that every other Asian in existence needs to have that issue. And even if they did, that still wouldn't be grounds for ruining an otherwise interesting movie concept. Moving on.
For years now, Liu has been part of a chorus of voices challenging the entertainment industry to expand beyond the confines of its templates it has overused on Asian American stories and characters in the past.
And instead of actually expanding anything, you've drummed out half of the interesting things that were previously in existence. That's not expansion, you dumbass. That is contraction by its very nature. There were more interesting things in existence until you applied your filter, and now there are less interesting things in existence because you applied your filter. That is not expansion by definition, you cunts. That is contraction of the options you previously had. And that, in and of itself, is the problem. You are making things less interesting on purpose because you have some moralistic, ideological hatred of those things that other people would find interesting. And you wonder why people have a problem with it. Up to and including other Asian people, who I'm sure there must be quite a lot of Asian people who really do want to see the weird kung fu aspects of the Marvel Universe played to their fullest, and would very much like seeing a character like Fing Fang Foom in Shang-Chi, especially given the Mandarin is involved. But they can't have Fin Fang Foom because you attempted to get offended on their behalf because of your own self-imposed guilt that makes no freaking sense, even by your own internal standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Moving on.
However, even as the face of an upcoming Marvel film that's nearly guaranteed to make a cultural impact, not really. Okay, Don, before you do what you do, may I finish a sentence?
Sorry.
However, even as the face of an upcoming Marvel film that's nearly guaranteed to make a cultural impact, Liu remains less than sanctimonious about his activism in the field. The actor said his formative years were shaped by immigrant parents who were driven by a yearning for stability but did not yet have the necessary footing in their new country to speak out.
Okay. Two things, Mr. Liu. One, if you actually made a Shang-Chi movie that was actually a Shang-Chi movie, especially one that that co-starred the Mandarin, and assuming the Mandarin was done correctly, you would probably make some kind of cultural impact because it would be an interesting movie and it would catch an organic popularity. But you've removed every reason you had in the property to give a shit, and therefore it is almost hilariously and incompetently guaranteed not to make any sort of meaningful impact because you ruined it. And number two, person who described Simu Liu as not sanctimonious. You and I have very different definitions of the term sanctimonious because this entire article was nothing but Shang of was nothing but Simu Liu's self-imposed guilt and moralistic sanctimony on the behalf of other Asian people who probably, for the most part, would disagree with him. You daft cunts. Moving on. And just so we're sorry, before we move on, just so we're aware, when Shang-Chi ends up being a disaster that bombs at the box office, you do not get to complain because that statement alone, that statement of it's nearly guaranteed to make a cultural impact, makes me want to see you fail just on principle because no one should go into any project assuming they're going to make an impact inherently because impact, cultural or otherwise, is something that anyone and everyone has to work for. And if you insinuate that you don't have to work for it because reasons, then you're going to incite people to want you to fail. Because no one should be that secure in the assumption that they're going to impact the world. The world is under no obligation to give a shit about you unless you actually have merit and skills that make it want to give a shit about you. Deal with it. Okay, now we can move on. Sorry, there was just that one last thing I had to get out. Brainstormer? Hello?
Sorry, totally forgot. I muted again.
Okay.
When I was a child, it really centered around surviving, putting food on the table. For them, they entered in the early 30s to do grad school, which is a lot later than most people. And so they were always anxious and very nervous and constantly playing catch up. He said that translated into the way that they parented me. That translated into their expectations of me and what they wanted me to become. Okay? I have nothing to say to that. I really don't. Like, I understand it. I get it.
Yeah, it's not really relevant to anything. It's just irrelevant backstory. Moving on.
All right. Liu carried some of that behavior with him when he began acting, taking on more stunt roles as a means to survive as an Asian face in entertainment. Oh my god.
Your race has nothing to do with that. Everyone starts at some level of grunt work when they start acting, unless they are very, very lucky and get discovered by major talent from the get-go. The fact that you blame the hardships you suffered on your race rather than simply chalking them up to how the world works is you being a daft moron. And you're making me really, really dislike you as a person now. I'm sorry, but it simply is the case.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone who can attribute the hardships they face in life to their demographic information instead of their own failings or their own set of circumstances is someone who does not gain my respect. Full stop. Period.
Okay. I mean, again, kind of going back to the Stuntman Reacts thing. I mean, most of those guys are also actors. I mean, just they're more used to working in stunts than actually acting.
Mm-hmm.
Some have actually gotten lucky to actually do acting and stunt work.
Mm-hmm.
There actually is a okay. If anyone remembers The Mandalorian, and there is an episode of Stuntman Act, where we actually had the stunt woman who played the armorer in episode 8.
Dang.
Yeah, if anyone knows The Mandalorian, you know what scene I'm talking about.
Yep.
Where she kicks the ass out of a bunch of stormtroopers. And for the record, that took them like 200 tries for like one shots for the whole scene.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Broadening the lens in which people see the Asian community was not top of mind, but after getting involved in projects like Ken's Convenience, things have changed. That's actually a show on Netflix. I watched it. It's not bad. It is just a sitcom, though, so.
Yeah, but I wonder why you started caring about all of this representational nonsense after you got into Hollywood. Was it because someone actually made a point that made you care about that, or was it because everyone around you was insisting that you care about that, and you just assumed that they must be right because reasons?
It's actually funny you bring that up because that's the next paragraph.
Oh God.
I got into the business when I was 22 years old, and I didn't have a woke bone in my body. All I wanted to do was be on screen and for people to pay attention to me. But we evolve, and our cause evolves, and the conversations today are certainly very different. Lee, you said, I find myself in the place where I'm not trying just to survive, I'm trying to thrive.
See, what you just described there is you being ideologically converted. You were in the right to start off with. You have not evolved by being forced to care about this woke shit. You have been co-opted. You are now a human shield for the concept of Asianness, which basically means that if you ever put a foot out of line ever, everyone is going to judge you doubly harshly because here's the thing. As much as wokeness and social justice as an ideology vilifies the shit out of people they define as the oppressor, if you, as one of the people they define as the oppressed, ever essentially demonstrate independent thought, you will be treated even worse because the people they define as oppressors are supposed to be the villains. So when a white person or a straight person or a male person does a bad thing, that's just the world working the way the social justice ideologues want it to work. When the person they cast as the villain does villainous things, that's just the world functioning as it should. But when a person they defined as morally pure, like the people they put on shelves like fucking Fabergé eggs, puts a foot out of line ever, they get doubly pissed because you were supposed to be a good person and you're doing a thing we've defined as the bad people. Therefore, you're even worse than the villains that we claim. But again, this is not you evolving. This is not you coming to a conclusion based on logic and evidence or on your own life experience. This is you being forced by sheer force of peer pressure and by sheer force of ideology into the role of a human shield rather than a independent entity in your own right. And the fact that you can describe that as though you have gained some sort of enlightenment is fucking terrifying when even you yourself admit that this is not organic to you. This is something that was imposed on you from without. Now I've gone from being mad at you to being just sad on your behalf because your brain has been stolen by an ideology, and I hope to God you get help soon because this is just scary. Imagine someone being brainwashed and then telling you the people doing the brainwashing were right to brainwash them. Imagine how scary that would be to hear if you were an unbrainwashed person. God damn it. Moving on.
Right, okay. Still, Liu's not ditching the lessons he learned from his parents. Just this time around, he's conscious of the privilege he has. Instead, he certainly won't waste it. I'm trying to take everything that my parents gave me and take the next step forward for my children. so that they feel more included and more equal. It's just never occurred to me not to speak out, he said. I don't think I should be held to any sort of pedestal.
Then what is this entire article and what is all that sanctimonious crap you've been spouting for the last 5 paragraphs?
There's more. I just think that I'm going to be one of those voices that are unapologetic, that are supportive of our community, because we just haven't had that many over time. And certainly, I think we're at the stage that where we are starting to learn as a community as a whole that we are stronger together than we are apart. Wow,
Okay,
that's
this is your problem. There is no reason whatsoever that the Asian community needs to put up with this Asianness concept. The ideology of social justice is not the only ideology that can speak on the behalf of these groups. And it certainly is not the only morally valid one. And you being an ideological stooge is not you being unapologetic. It is you being uncritical of the people who have brainwashed you. And that is frightening. That is not something to celebrate. That is something to fear as though your life depends on it. I pray to whatever forces that exist in the universe, sir, that you gain your individuality back at some point in the near future. And when you come out against all of this nonsense, I, for one, will welcome you back with open arms. But holy hell, until then, I feel so sorry for you. I can't imagine what it must be like in your head to believe truly that you can't think for yourself in a way that sins against the collective of Asianness. That's just horrifying. I can't imagine believing that my actions reflect on everyone who has ever been like me in any way whatsoever. Yeah. But moving on. Also, Bat City stuff is in the comment section.
that's all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so we're gonna move on. Hopefully this won't take us too long. Like a couple ones.
Mm-hmm.
This is unfortunate news, but it is news nonetheless, and it's something we should cover.
Yeah.
Because we did kind of cover Jupiter's Legacy. Well, okay, so yeah, this is from what's on Netflix.com. Jupiter's Legacy Season 2 canceled. At Netflix, cast may appear in future projects. This is by Casey Moore and published on June 2nd, 2021.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this actually kind of surprised me. To be fair, I just recently started watching Jupiter's Legacy, like literally today. Because I've been busy with other stuff and other things.
Mm-hmm.
But I was a fan, specifically because we did cover the trailer. And the research I started doing into the series and stuff.
Yeah, and I recommended it to him repeatedly because I think the show is awesome. And it's a shame that we won't get any more of it.
So shall we?
We shall. Also, congratulations to Bat City stuff. I read your comment. Go for it, man. Good luck.
I didn't say good luck because that just ultimately ends with bad luck.
True. Break a leg. Break all the legs.
I already said that. So.
Yeah, that's why I went with that.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah. Okay. So Miller World has officially kicked off on Netflix with the release of Jupiter's Legacy, and while there is a lot to look forward to from the Miller World universe, this was pretty much the only thing. In the future, will we be heading back with the Utopian and the gang for season 2? The answer to that question looks like no, as Netflix is not moving forward with season 2, but isn't ruling out returning to the franchise.
Yeah, this makes me sad.
Yeah,
it really does.
because everything I had seen of the show, it really got me intrigued and invested, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Because, and I think, again, the major problem, we'll get more into it, but just kind of like first thoughts here before we move on with the article,
Mm-hmm.
is I think a lot of people were expecting a live action Invincible.
Or something approximating The Boys, something that would subvert expectations, quote unquote.
Yeah. Which, I mean, it kind of doesn't do that.
Yeah. I would go so far as to say it wasn't trying to or wasn't supposed to do that. As I often say, in a world where everything is being subversive, the most subversive thing you can actually be is something that is sincere and plays it straight.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And we'll get more into it. I don't want to like talk all before we read the written. Early reviews suggest the show was getting off to a relatively mixed start, which shouldn't be all too surprising given that it was negatively affected by the pandemic. A change in showrunner and some reshoots which happened earlier this year made for a rather messy and inconsistent first season.
I disagree. I mean, it wasn't world changing or anything, but it was certainly good.
Yeah, and I've seen some reviews from like people we know and interact with, like in our circle,
Mm-hmm.
and I honestly kind of disagree with them on like their reviews because like they didn't like it, which is fine. Like they don't have to like it. I'm not. It's just like their reasonings for it are weird to me because, and we mentioned this before in when we reviewed the trailer.
Mm-hmm.
Is that the series of Jupiter's Legacy is only about like 10 or so issues.
Yeah.
And again, I think you and I had a brief discussion about this on, I think, Thursday, briefly.
Yeah, I think it was.
Is Mark Millar, as impressive of a writer as he is, he's better at making pitches than writing a full-on story.
Yeah.
And that's not really an insult or anything. I'm not trying to insult him. I'm just that's more.
No, it happens that way sometimes. And it's better when someone takes his base concept and kind of tweaks it a little bit to make it more.
I mean, that's how we got Kick-Ass, the first one at least, and in the Kingsman movies. Really, if you put Matthew Vaughn in a Mark Millar property, I think he makes it awesome.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I could kind of see, and I'm all for like changing things when you need to change them to fit a different format when you're adapting, because it's an adaptation. It can't be a one-for-one repeat.
Right, and it wouldn't work if it was because of the nature of the medium you're working in.
Yeah, because in a comic, the only budget you have to work with is the limitation of your imagination.
Yeah, the paper and the ink, basically.
Yeah. Well, on a TV show, that's a little more tangible in terms of budgeting.
Yeah. Also, there's a difference in time and scope when you're dealing with TV, because in a comic you can read a comic at whatever pace you want to read it at, but in a TV show, it takes up time and effort and energy, so you gotta use it accordingly.
Yeah. So moving forward.
Mm-hmm.
With that said, the 8-episode superhero series is out now, and if you're all done, let's dig into season 2. As Netflix renewed Jupiter's Legacy for season 2, official renewal status not moving forward. This was updated on the 2nd. So yeah. Which again is a real shame, to be fair.
Yeah, because there was a lot of potential for Jupiter's Legacy, And mark my words, in about 5 years, when when people look back on Jupiter's Legacy, they're going to probably say, this was a lot better than I was expecting. I wonder why I didn't like it back in the day. And the reason I think, and we've touched on this a little bit already, is because they were expecting something like The Boys or Invincible, something that would be subversive, and what they got was something a lot more sincere.
Well, yeah, I think if anything, it could have been the timing of the release of
Yeah,
Jupiter's
because it was in the midst of Invincible popularity, so yeah, that's what everyone was primed for, was something resembling Invincible or The Boys, but what they got was something a lot more like a pulp adventure story mixed with a little bit of Golden Age stuff, mixed with kind of a juxtaposition or a juxtapo of like 90s edgy material.
Yeah, and honestly, I think it worked. From what I have seen via clips of YouTube and also the first episode, because I've recently watched it, it has potential.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get more into it as we go along.
Yeah.
In the week leading up to the release of Jupiter's Legacy Season 1, we put out a report saying that the show has been given a renewal based on the comments of Mark Millar to the Scottish publication Herald Scotland. Speaking about the future of Millarworld on Netflix, Miller or Millar, whatever, said next year there will be Jupiter Season 2, there will be the Magic Order, a horror show, and a big spy project.
Okay, so I am getting my Magic Future question answered in the Millarworld. So
Well,
yay.
no, remember the trailer I sent you about the comic series?
Mm-hmm.
I'm thinking that's the show that they're doing.
Right, but still, it's in the same world as Jupiter's Legacy, even if they're not going to address Jupiter's Legacy anymore, because they basically want a Mark Millar cinematic universe.
Actually, the Millarworld properties exist within a multiverse, if I remember correctly. I mean, they could set the show in the universe. Obviously, I couldn't say one way or another because I don't know how that's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, so just have to wait and see. That told us that season 2 was planned for next year. Whether that meant to be released or just in production is unclear. However, that turns out not to be the case, as we were corrected soon after publishing that post. It simply is the current intention for the show, assuming it gets a renewal, however, and no longer is the plan, with the series effectively canceled.
Which, again, bullshit, because Jupiter's Legacy was actually really good if people knew what they were getting ahead of time.
Right. Also, I just want to bring up the fact, like, there are legit criticisms you can have for the show. I'm not going to argue that, sure.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's definitely
season is perfect. That's the question. When has a show ever had a quote unquote perfect first season? Because that's when they're trying to get their footing. They're trying to figure out.
They're figuring out where to go and what to do with their material.
Yeah.
And if they had gotten a season 2, they probably would have improved significantly on what people didn't like about season 1. But
yeah, it's like.
Yeah. But unfortunately, we're never gonna get a season 2 because people are dumb.
Yep. Millar was hopeful in interviews in the days leading up to the release, saying season 2 is up to the audience. We don't want to get too cocky. All I see is we're going into this incredibly bullish. We feel great about it. I've watched even over COVID. I sat in edits every day pretty much, and I never tire of it. So fingers crossed people love it as much as we do. And that just makes it hurt even more, to be honest.
Yeah, I'm entirely on Mark Millar's side here. For the record, Mark, if you ever see this, I don't know why you would, and I'm not sure what you would think of us if you did, but I, for one, love Jupiter's Legacy. I, for one, think that it really could have been the next Invincible or The Boys if it had been given a little bit more room to stretch.
I wouldn't say The Boys, to be honest, but that's just
Well, no, because The Boys is shit. But I mean, in terms of how it was received or how it was like how it impacted things.
right. Okay,
Um,
fair. It's fair.
but yeah, I genuinely do like Jupiter's Legacy, and I am really pissed that it's not getting a season 2.
Right.
Um,
Moving on.
yeah.
Despite doing relatively well on Netflix's top 10 list, although it fell out of the global top 50 on May 29th, we got word on June 2nd that the show would not be returning in its current form for season 2. In a carefully worded exclusive on Deadline, Niley Adjureva saying Jupiter's Legacy will not continue as an ongoing series, adding that the streamer has opted to let go the high-profile cast. That means that the cast is free to pursue other projects with the show effectively on ice or canceled for the foreseeable future. For the foreseeable. With a major cast like this, having them aligned for a return in the future seems to be unlikely.
Again, this is bullshit. I declare this to be thoroughly bullshit.
Right.
And in a world that made sense, this would do well.
Right.
But it didn't.
Again, I think it was the release schedule that might have been the big problem for it.
That is also possible. But I am grateful that it, at the very least, it seems like we're gonna get more shows in like the same universe, just not with the same characters.
Yeah. Could make an appearance though, or mention.
Yeah, they might make cameos and stuff, which
Anyway,
I'm fine with.
Miller followed up with a statement saying, "We're confident we'll return to it later," which can be found on Twitter. Although there's lots of crossover potential for all of Millworld's properties in the future, this does mean that Jupiter's Legacy as a standalone project is over, but doesn't mean we won't see the return of the characters. And there's a tweet here. I actually will read this honestly because it seems interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is a Miller World tweet, Mr. Mark Miller. Some big news from us on what's coming up next in the live action from Miller World, peeps. I'm really proud of what the team achieved with Jupiter's Legacy and the amazing work everyone did on that origin season. I've been asked a lot about what we're planning next with this world, and the answer is to see what the supervillains are getting up to. Cool.
Okay, that's interesting.
I mean, to be fair, they didn't mention a lot in the show about the supervillains and stuff. We only get glimpses of what they're doing and things. And
Right, so villains it is.
That's fine. I'm curious.
Mm-hmm.
There actually is a few ideas. I think I know what they could do. Specifically, one I might bring it up. I've always loved crime stories from Scorsese to Tarantino, and supervillains are always the most fun part of any superhero story. Yes and no, to be honest. That's my opinion. I prefer the superheroes over the villains, but that's a teeter-totter.
So wait. Scorsese and Tarantino. So you're telling me we might get something analogous to Joker in the Jupiter's Legacy universe? Hell yeah.
Or Reservoir Dogs or Taxi Driver, which I realize are inspirations for.
Right. Yeah. Which is why I went to Joker, because that's literally doing like a Scorsese movie with a comic book villain.
Right.
But yeah, something analogous to Joker in the Jupiter's Legacy universe would be entirely in favor of. However, I'm just again, Mark, if you ever watched this, not sure if you will or if you'd like us if you did, but if you want my humble opinion, fine with the idea of doing basically Joker in the Jupiter's Legacy universe, but at some point, just gonna put this little bug in your ear. Give me a magic user. Please, for the love of God, I want magic users.
Right. Okay. Do something exclusively focused on the villains they fight just feels incredibly fresh as we explore what's it like to be a bad guy in a world crawling with good guys who want to put you in jail. Yeah, no, I mean, like, to be fair, yeah, actually would be interesting because we've never really seen that. I mean, we see quote unquote superheroes in the boys be essentially supervillains.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. But we don't. But in the context of the Jupiter Legacy, the only villains we see are Black Star and kind of Brainwave, if we take the final reveal into account.
Like we're talking legit villains, right? Not like lower tier superpowered crooks or anything.
Yeah, I hope we're talking about like a Lex Luthor type, or
There is one comic I remember like checking out, not checking out, but more studying from Miller World called Nemesis, which is basically like a Batman who laughs kind of villain, essentially.
Ooh. Nemesis is also the name of a character, or the title of a character in the Dresden Files. Um, he's kind of um, see, minor tangent, but in the Dresden Files, um, one of the um, one of the hordes of big bads is the outsiders, who are basically Lovecraftian creatures who want to destroy reality. And the most powerful beings among the outsiders are are the group of knights called they're knights of the outside, and they're often referred to as walkers. And there's three of them. One of them is called He Who Walks Behind, one of them is called He Who Walks Before, and one of them is called He Who Walks Beside. And their names are all tied to how they function in relation to the other outsiders and or to reality. And the powers of He Who Walks Beside is essentially to get inside people's minds and play with their nature to such a degree that they can take your um, your driving impulses, your ambitions, your desires, and twist them and corrupt them into basically turning you into a supervillain. Um, and the other and another name for He Who Walks Beside is Nemesis. So that's the first thing that popped into my head when I heard the name Nemesis. Um, I doubt that this will be quite that epic scale, but I can dream. God damn it. Moving on. Brainstormer, you might be muted again. You are producing no sound, sir. Sorry, guys. I'm trying to get Brainstormer's attention so that if he is muted, he's unmute. Okay.
Sorry, I was grabbing dinner.
Okay.
What'd I miss?
Nothing. Just me going on a little bit of a tangent about a character called Nemesis in the Dresden Files, and then me realizing that you were gone and wondering if you were muted again.
To be completely honest, I thought you'd be still ranting by the time I came back.
Uh-huh.
All right. Moving forward.
Yeah.
All right. Jupiter's Legacy is a vast and rich space with lots of characters to mine, and so I'm happy to share that our level, next next step here is a live-action version of the Super Crooks comic I created with Lenny Francis Yu a few years back. Given where we're going next, we've made the tough call of letting our incredible cast out of their show commitment as we continue to thoughtfully develop all realms of the Jupiter's Legacy saga. Uh, we're confident we'll return to it later, and just want to say thanks to you guys for your continued support and to the casting crew who made this look so great.
Yeah, given how nice and how definitely into it Mark Millar is, this just makes it even sadder.
Yeah. Um, this cancellation was probably not completely a surprise, but regardless, it is a disappointing start for Middle World on Netflix. Kind of is, yeah.
Yeah, you're not kidding.
Uh, what we expected from Jupiter's Legacy season two. Warning: spoilers for the end of season one of Jupiter's Legacy below. Although the series roughly follows the comics, using them as an exact guide isn't particularly useful given the show deviates wildly in many of the modern storylines. Okay, also I should bring this up. The Boys did that too. And
Yeah.
no one seems to have a fucking problem with it, but people who are fans of the comic apparently got up in arms. Some people got up in arms about it not deviating wildly from the comic, like
Yeah.
Jupiter's.
Never mind that Jupiter's Legacy is only 10 issues long, so there's not really much comic to deviate from, but that's a different story, I guess.
Like, again, one, it's an adaptation, so it's going to be different.
Two, it's basing itself on a very short, very small source material. So if it wants to build a complex world, it kind of needs to deviate at least a little bit.
Three, if it had gone on, I believed it was doing these changes and adding things. One, to make the characters and moments from the comics have a bigger impact.
Yeah. Two, Mark Millar himself, or four, Mark Millar himself was involved, so it's entirely possible he might have learned something in between when he wrote Jupiter's Legacy and now, and much in the same way as Robert Kirkman is doing with Invincible, he might have found a more interesting way of telling the story that he told originally in the comics.
Mm-hmm. Brandon, for instance, in the comics, leads a similar life to Chloe, i.e., celebrity endorsements and living the high life, but doesn't in the show. See, that makes sense and it works.
Yeah, because making both the children self-obsessed dick bags probably wouldn't have worked so well.
Yeah. The comics also switch between 2013 and 2020, whereas the show only sticks to two timelines.
So far that we're aware of, but again, this was season one, and God only knows how long it would have gone on for had it been allowed to go on for.
I'd say roughly 5 to 6 seasons, probably.
Yeah, that seems to be a pretty standard run of the show.
Mm-hmm.
And there probably still would have been spin-offs and stuff in the same universe because he was trying to build an entire Millar universe, basically.
Mm-hmm. Um, so while we could speculate about some of the beats that could transition to the show from the comics, It'd be far better to speculate where the show heads next based on the events of the final episode. In which case, we just learned that Brainwave is behind most of the modern day troubles the heroes face with him trying to take over the Union, and was behind the cloning of Blackstar. He clearly has high ambitions given he eventually kills his own daughter to progress his agenda.
Yeah, that was the moment where I was like, and immediately fuck you.
Mm-hmm.
Because I actually was kind of on Brainwave's side right up until that moment.
Right. We'll get more into like the actual story later. I just want to read this out first before we get into it. Season 1 didn't do enough, in our view anyway, to really tell us what happened to Blue Bolt and Skyfox, so hopefully their breakaway from the Union is a little more fleshed out in Season 2. Yeah, again, like it's Season 1, they're trying to set stuff up. And again, no first season of any show is perfect.
Yeah, and further again, we're talking about something that has only 10 issues worth of base material. So if it wants to pad things out, it needs to space things out a little bit.
If you don't do that, you have the other problem of you have that problem of overstuffing.
Yeah, things move through each other too quickly, and then we end up with a 10 episode miniseries instead of a 5-season show.
Mm-hmm. With much of season 1 focusing on the origin of the original founding members of the Union, with the kids mostly taking a back seat. We're expecting the emphasis to shift story-wise onto the kids in Season 2. Yeah, again, because in the comic of Judas Legacy, the origin of the Seven of the Union was actually brushed over for the modern day story. Because you have a TV show, you can expand more on ideas introduced in the comics that weren't.
Yeah. And also, I wouldn't mind if they kept the focus split a little bit between the past and the modern stuff, because it made for an interesting juxtaposition between golden age / pulp adventure stories and 90s era edgy shit.
Plus, you get to see the difference between certain characters then and now.
Yeah.
Possibly events that shape the characters into what we see in present day.
Plus, it would have been really interesting to follow the Union through the different ages of comics and see how you go from a golden age style. Everything is mostly lighthearted and upbeat and just stopping criminals and stuff. Up through a Silver Age goofiness phase, and then a more modern things start to get dark and actually have consequences.
Well, also the moments that Walter brought up, World War II, where they didn't get involved, and the effects they had on people, on the members of the Union and stuff, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
Which much of I read that. We're expecting the emphasis to shift storylines. Hutch and Chloe are on a mission to find Hutch's father, Skyfox. Brandon, Paragon, has seemingly patched his relationship with his father after taking issues with the code, but clearly has a strong relationship with Brainwave. Again, they were setting things up, which you kind of have to do for a first season.
Yeah.
Especially if it's just 8 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
Which I understand is kind of a problem, and I agree they probably could have done it better, but I'm fine with the final product because it seems really cool and interesting and where it could have gone later.
Yeah. If only we had a season 2.
Mm-hmm. where each of the three kids will ultimately fall, good or bad, is still up in the air, and the comics tell us that we should expect the unexpected on this front.
Um, I don't know if expecting the unexpected. See, this is the problem. When everything in existence is telling you to expect the unexpected, what becomes unexpected? Like again, it's the issue of when everything is being subversive, the most subversive thing you can actually do is just playing things straight.
Mm-hmm. Um, what's next from Miller World on Netflix? There's a whole host of upcoming Miller World movies and TV shows in development outside of Jupiter's Legacy. Elsewhere, Mark Miller has also revealed the next several years of Miller World on Netflix are already mapped out, with Miller saying, "We've got the next 3 or 4 years planned out, and that's just the television side." Ooh,
You have my attention, Mr. Miller. Well played, sir.
but wait, there's more. Millar compares his role to Kevin Feige's. Uh, Miller is signed up to work on projects for a good few years and plans to build out 20 franchises.
Holy shit. If this works, I just damn. Well, you just holy fuck.
Mm-hmm. Um, in the previously mentioned Deadline article, it announced a live-action spinoff for Super Crooks, which is getting an anime series later in 2021.
Okay. So live action and anime, and they're gonna cross over, and I want more of this, please.
Honestly, I think Jupiter's Legacy could have been cooler if it was like not animation, but well, okay, yeah, animation, but like maybe 3D animated. You know what I mean?
Oh, computer animated, yeah.
Yeah, but not like in a DreamWorks fashion. More like like those 3D anime that you see that are really good.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
I liked seeing it in live action, but I wouldn't be opposed to like spin-offs
well,
at
I
the
think
same
it's okay. My reasoning for it is obviously you can do a lot more with animation,
True.
but also because like you never really have. I don't think any of us have seen like a 3D animated superhero series before, and I think that would have been groundbreaking.
Unless you count something along the lines of like Iron Man Armored Adventures or well, I guess that was only kind of 3D animated.
It was
Or like
cell shaded.
yeah,
Um,
or the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles recent shows
right.
were
Okay.
computer animated.
Fair enough. Fair enough. I retract my previous statement then.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, moving forward.
Hmm. Um, in the meantime, we suggest you pick up copies of Jupiter's Legacy and spin off Jupiter's Circle, as they're excellent source material and it's interesting to compare and contrast the show's story to the original. I don't really want to do that. I want more to look at the show as its own thing and the comics as another, because I feel like
Mm-hmm.
that's always been the big issue with like these kind of adaptation things with like the fan bases.
Uh-huh.
Um, how I will say this though. I think Jupiter's Legacy might be one of the like at the beginning of the decade, at least
Mm-hmm.
the 2020s. It's one of the better superhero shows out there.
Yeah. Which is even more of a shame that it crashed and burned, apparently.
Right. Um, sorry. mainly because it was interesting from a writing standpoint for me, and also
Mhm.
like characters and stuff, sure. But the writing in views of the different and like the dialogue scenes where they discuss like the code and like
Yeah, the philosophy behind it all was
yeah,
interesting.
yeah, and I think again people weren't expecting that, and again expected like a live action Invincible.
Yeah, they were expecting something that subverted expectations, and ironically, they got bitchy when their expectations were actually subverted by a mostly sincere take on things.
Yeah, um, and I think mainly the biggest thing that it's it actually I mean like it is deconstructive, not in like the typical sense
Mm-hmm.
deconstructing. It's more deconstructive of the whole classic superhero tropes, and by that I mean the philosophy of a fairly typical superhero.
Yeah, it plays with the meta context of superheroes.
Hmm. And like the idea,
Starting with the pulp adventure era and moving all the way up through the 90s sort of edgy era.
yeah, but more so like the whole concept of like should superheroes be involved in things that humanity does that don't involve, like wars and things. And you and I had a
what
discussion.
what what is the responsibility that the power of a superhero comes with?
Hmm.
To what degree should they be held responsible for not interfering in like global policy or whatever?
Yeah, which is interesting to think about because I don't think a lot of other things have really done that before.
Yeah, because I mean, on some level, we all sort of understand the notion of if someone was that powerful, they probably should just stick to problems that they are necessary to solve. Because if they didn't, then it would basically be like a dictatorship. But on the other, if someone like Hitler or Mao or whomever shows up and they don't make like a Golden Age comic and just fly Hitler to the UN and have him be tried there, um, then are they not on some level responsible for the atrocities of something like the Holocaust?
Hmm.
And where is the line? What is the threshold behind which this person is just a world leader versus this person is the next Hitler? Because I can guarantee you that someone like uh, Mugabe or Bin Laden or somebody could easily be just, considered just a world leader instead of a terrorist threat, no matter how many people they actually are technically threatening. And where does that stand in regards to like international law and stuff too? So all of these questions and more will not be answered because people were expecting a subversion when they got sincerity. And therefore there's no season 2 for Jupiter's Legacy. I'm sad.
Yeah, but I'm still glad what we got.
Yeah. What we got was good.
Hmm.
And I'm glad that they're not completely scrapping the entire world of Jupiter's Legacy and that we might see those characters again in some regards.
Hmm. Okay, to round out all things, where's again this was sent to me by Dalton,
Mm-hmm.
and I suppose for him it is positive.
Yeah, it's good news. It's definitely good news. It's not perfect news, but I will take it.
Mm-hmm. Um, sorry, eating. Yeah, so it's from ScreenRant.com. This was written by Cooper Hood, published June 4th, 2021.
Mhm.
Doctor Strange, two writer compares him to Anthony Bourdain and Indiana Jones.
Yeah, and this isn't probably the comparison I would have made. If I were to describe using like other characters, what I prefer when where Doctor Strange is concerned, I probably would have said something along the lines of Robert Langdon from the Da Vinci Code meets like Tywin or Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones.
Probably Tyrion.
Yeah.
uh,
Or maybe uh Nicolas Cage's character from the National Treasure movies mixed with somebody. I can't figure out quite.
Doctor Strange 2's writer Michael Waldron compares the Marvel Sorcerer to Anthony Bourdain and Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones in the sequel. Um, Doctor Strange and in the Multiverse of Madness. Writer Michael Wardrone compares Stephen Strange to Anthony Bourdain and Harrison Ford's Indiana Jones. The upcoming Marvel Cinematic Universe adventure is shaping up to be quite the spectacle. Benedict Cumberbatch's Sorcerer will return after Spider-Man: No Way Home and lead an ensemble film that features Scarlet Witch, America Chavez, Wong, and many other characters, even with the large.
Why on Earth or anywhere else was America Chavez listed before Wong?
While Wong is technically a sidekick.
I know, but he's more primary to Doctor Strange than America Chavez of all people.
I don't know, man. Maybe it's just the way they listed it. It's inconsequential. I'm more pissed that it's a character in this movie.
Yeah, I prefer I honestly, given what was set up at the end of Doctor Strange 1 with Mordo coming through and killing off various different sorcerers because there's too many sorcerers according to him. The way I would handle America Chavez if you put a gun to my head and made me have to deal with America Chavez would be she's one of the ones that gets killed off when Mordo sucks away her energy. That's how I would handle her, but that's just me. Um, anyway, I'm trying to remain positive because there is actually some semblance of logic behind the writer's comparisons here. So yay, which means that somebody might actually understand how to write Doctor Strange, maybe? Question mark. Um, so moving forward, not looking at the America Chavez shaped elephant in the room.
Right. Okay. Da, 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 da. Even with the larger cast, Doctor Strange will still be the central figure in the movie's events. Obviously, because it's his movie.
I would hope that didn't need saying, but I remember, knowing the world we currently live in and knowing people's reaction to WandaVision, that is kind of a necessary thing to say. But yes, thank God Doctor Strange is still the primary character in Doctor Strange 2.
Mm-hmm. Um, Audiences first saw Benedict Cumberbatch play the arrogant sergeant turned magician, sorcerer, in 2016's Doctor Strange.
No, specifically the last 10 minutes of 2016's Doctor Strange. He didn't really show up before that. As in, the character was not the character until the last 10 minutes. But I digress.
Okay. Sorry, I'm just giving you kind of a look because I know you're going to go on a fucking tangent every goddamn.
No tangent. We're moving on. We're trying to focus on the positive and not look at the you fucked up his primary origin movie
Oh, Dan.
elephant in the room. I know. I'm sorry. Going on.
The movie was another success from the MCU, financially possibly, but mm, but Strange's story did feel familiar to many as his origin played out. Future appearances in Thor Ragnarok, Avengers Infinity War, and Avengers Endgame allowed him to become more of a standout character and show more of a mastery of his powers.
He was barely in Endgame, and he has not become the Sorcerer Supreme yet, so he is not mastering his powers. Moving on.
Yeah, positive, sure.
I'm. We're not to the positive part yet because they put too much preamble ahead of it.
I have to, otherwise, why would you read an article?
They could actually make the article about the thing in question, but what am I thinking? This is internet journalism. That's heresy. You can't just make the article about the thing in question. You have to go on for 20 minutes about nothing in particular. Yeah.
This left fans eager to see how Doctor Strange's MCU arc and characterization evolve, as it appears he's positioned to be one of the franchise's most important characters.
I mean, yes and no. He really shouldn't be like a main character of anything because he's supposed to be kind of like the Yoda or the Merlin type character. He's supposed to kind of puppet master things from the shadows more so than taking an active role in things, but that's splitting hairs. So moving on.
Mm-hmm. Marvel Studios has Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness scheduled to hit theaters roughly 6 years after the original movie. Wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Uh,
I'd rather it have the October release date in 2022, not the March one, but splitting hairs again.
you love doing that, though.
Like, you never ever split hairs about Superman adaptations.
No, I don't.
You see the look I'm giving you right now.
No, my criticisms are fairly valid and actually address large misconceptions that the public has about Superman. That's not really splitting hairs. Plus, you're a drama queen, so.
Just because it's true doesn't mean I'll let you get away with it. Yeah.
Yes.
Uh,
Okay. Right. Okay. Of the 6 years after the original movie, which is honestly surprising to me, but whatever. And the sequel has almost an entirely new creative team. Loki's head writer Michael Waldron worked on the script with director Sam Raimi. Waldron was recently profiled by Vanity Fair ahead of Loki's launch on Disney Plus, but he also discussed what fans can expect from Doctor Strange 2. This included fielding questions about the people or characters that inspired him to how he wrote Strange. Waldron named Anthony Bourdain and Indiana Jones as some inspirations and explained how they are similar to the MCU's Sorcerer. Okay, so here's the quote. I gravitated toward travel documentarian and chef Anthony Bourdain. Strange is an elitist as a neurosurgeon and a sorcerer. Anthony Bourdain was a man of the people, but there was that intense intellect. You always feel you could eviscerate. He always felt like he could eviscerate anybody with his words at any time. but yet Anthony Bourdain never really punched down. That was the first ingredient in the stew for Doctor Strange.
That like I don't know enough about Anthony Bourdain to determine whether that's an accurate um choice to use Anthony Bourdain as the like anchor for that idea, but that general idea of Doctor Strange being the sort of person who has seen it all, done it all, and can handle his shit by simply like eviscerating you with a side comment is accurate enough. And like if you had to pick somebody who was as worldly and as like expert as a neurosurgeon turned sorcerer, a documentarian and chef probably isn't far off. So I will accept that. It's not the first choice I would have made, but again, it at least shows some kind of understanding of this character, which is better than most people get. So
Mm-hmm.
well played.
Okay. He's Indiana Jones in a cloak to me. He's a hero who can take a punch. That's what made those Harrison Ford heroes so great. Those guys get their asses kicked. Look at Stephen Strange in the first movie. He's really getting beat up, but he's very capable and everything.
Yeah, again, this is fine so long as you don't confuse taking a punch with giving a punch, because Stephen Strange is not a fighter; he is a scholar. But if you mean Indiana Jones in the sense of being a professor who gets the shit kicked out of him on the regular, then sure. Again, it's not probably the parallel I would have gone with, but it is a parallel that does kind of make some sense, and his justifications for the parallels make more sense. So I'm good.
Hmm. Walron's inspiration for crafting Doctor Strange's character in the sequel highlight how the Sorcerer could be portrayed differently. It is true that Strange is about as brilliant as they come, but he's previously shown a willingness to lord it over others. He made a point of making sure fellow surgeons knew he was smarter and didn't shy away from trading barbs with Tony Stark in Infinity War. Well, to be fair, Tony's an asshole, and
Yeah, that's not a reflection of his original arrogance. That is simply not being willing to be walked all over by Tony Stark and Tony Stark automatically getting to think he's the smartest person in the room. Because when Doctor Strange is in that room, even with somebody like Tony Stark, at least as far as the mystical side of things go, it doesn't matter. He's the smartest person in the room. He's not, it's not like he's walking into um Tony's laboratory and telling him how to science properly or how to engineer his Iron Man suits better. He's just saying like this is more my sphere of influence than yours, so you will respect me as an expert in this field. Because this is something that I wish movies and shows in general would get through their freaking heads. Just because a person is an expert in one area does not mean they are an expert in all areas. Tony Stark may be the greatest scientific mind in the world as far as the MCU goes. But when it comes to philosophy, when it comes to mysticism, when it comes to scholarship, he defers to Stephen Strange. And in the same way, Stephen Strange may know everything in the world about medicine or about magic, but when it comes to science and engineering, he defers to people like Tony or even Shuri to some extent. That doesn't mean that either one of them is smarter. It just means that they have different specializations.
mhm.
Moving on.
If Waldron was drawn to Bourdain's ability to be the smartest person in the room, but still be relatable and personable, these elements could be added to Strange's personality for Doctor Strange too. I think
It's not really an addition so much as it is just writing Doctor Strange like Doctor Strange is supposed to be written. Because that's how Doctor Strange has kind of always been. at least post sorcerer or post surgeon mode. In actuality, I think that in surgeon mode, he was actually kind of lowballed because he was much less arrogant than he probably should have been. But in terms of sorcerer mode, when he's kind of learned humility, this is how Doctor Strange should be written. This is why I'm excited to have somebody who actually seems to know something about how to write Doctor Strange, writing Doctor Strange in the sequel. Because as awesome as all the raw materials of Doctor Strange 2 were looking, it could have been horribly fucked up if they had not gotten the right person to write it. But it seems like the person who's writing it at least has some idea of what direction to go in.
Mm-hmm. Although the comparison to Indiana Jones was done to highlight the resistance that Strange also shows, it is also an apt comparison to make given the giant adventure he's expected to embark on. Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness will take Strange across the multiverse into different realities or dimensions. This could give the movie more of an adventure feeling, which the Indiana Jones movies easily accomplish. With Strange set to appear in the MCU prior to his sequel, hopefully how he is depicted matches any changes that might come in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness.
Okay, again, the writer of the Screen Rant article is being a dumbass. They're not changes. They're just more accurately reflective of Doctor Strange as a character than he has been previously. But that being said, I also think the writer of the Screen Rant article is focusing on the wrong element of Indiana Jones. The part of Indiana Jones that needs to be focused on for Doctor Strange is the fact that, and people always seem to forget this, but Indy is a professor in his day job. Despite however badass he might be with a whip and with a gun and whatever, and however scrappy he might be in a game of fisticuffs, he is first and foremost an expert on mythology, religion, and archaeology. And that's very much something that Doctor Strange should have, because knowing shit about mystical artifacts and the history thereof and the mythology thereof is kind of his whole MO. If he's not good at that, then someone has fucked up. But all in all, despite the terrible understanding of the person in question that the Screen Rant writer showed, the actual writer of Doctor Strange 2 seems to know kind of what he's dealing with as far as Doctor Strange. And therefore, of course, I will be judging Loki all the more harshly because he's apparently the main writer on Loki. But if Loki is good and this is the route they're going with Doctor Strange 2, then this gives me hope for Doctor Strange 2, a hope I have not had for quite a while, because it seems like they've thrown everything in the kitchen sink except Doctor Strange into Doctor Strange 2 a lot of the time. So hopefully I'm wrong. And I really would like to see at least one good Doctor Strange movie before I die, so someone please give me that.
Right. I got nothing else to say. Dalton?
Yeah. That's my end of rant as well. I'm optimistic for Doctor Strange 2, more optimistic than I've been in a while. I hope it's not unfounded.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, with that, folks, I want to say goodbye, adios, aloha, auf Wiedersehen, sayonara, peace, cheers, and
don't fuck up Doctor Strange. Now fuck off.